Welcome to Our Interesting Times with host Timothy Kelly, who interviews today's top alternative and revisionist thinkers.
May you live in interesting times.
Welcome to another episode of Our Interesting Times. My guest this evening is Chris Kendall. He is the proprietor of Hoax Busters Call. Chris, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, Tim. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for coming on the show. A couple of issues we want to talk about. Of course, in the news, at least in the alternative media, we have this so-called Pizzagate scandal, the revelations that came out of these emails and Instagrams. Some released through WikiLeaks, I believe. Others, I think, were just out there, weren't really hacking, or just out there. People just got notice of it because of the WikiLeaks stuff, exposing what appears to be a pedophile ring, an elite pedophile ring, operating out of Washington, D.C. at this pizzeria, Comet Ping Pong Pizza. And, of course, the proprietor of that business, James Elefante, is one of the top 50 most influential lobbyists in Washington, D.C., at least that's what I think Washingtonian claims. And he has a lot of links, a lot of or connections, a lot of very powerful political players in Washington, D.C. One is the Podesta brothers, Tony and John Podesta, because that links into the leaked into the Clinton campaign, the Clintons, and the power structure in Washington, D.C. And we've also had a story, or at least the media has been focused on this issue of so-called fake news, I guess, of blaming the alternative media, the internet, as being a purveyor of propaganda, fake news, false stories, smear jobs, whatever, what have you. I guess distinguish it from the reliable mainstream media, of course. So you've had a few thoughts and a couple shows devoted to those topics. So how do you want to address those issues?
Well, yeah, like you said, I've done a couple of shows on that and talked about it, and I've since then kind of thinking it over a bit more. I'm looking. I've looked into it somewhat, fairly extensively. I understand what people are pointing out as far as this pedophile ring and what these different posts and stuff that have been gleaned off the internet before the alleged perpetrators took down their accounts, and changed they changed the logo on the pizza place. I thought that was pretty interesting. It's like they kind of just evidence of something, they don't really want people. They know people are going to be looking at this, so they kind of are cleaning it up a bit, right? So is that evidence there's something there? I tend to think, is it a pedophile ring with all the stuff kind of together like that? I mean, if you look at what the polls are suggestive of, and you look at the businesses with the which look to have logos on their building that are happen to be closely, visually related to pedophile logos, and then the proximity to the Clinton operation that's deals with human trafficking, and then there's the alleged I forget his name, but he's in the Department of Justice over human trafficking, and he supposedly owns the pizza place that has the logo with the pedophile symbol embedded in the logo quite clearly. It's not really that vague or ambiguous, and that's the one that got changed.
Oh, that's Andrew Klein, I believe, at Besta Pizza or something.
Besta Pizza at the Andrew Klein. Is that now? I haven't looked into whether or not that is confirmed to be absolute fact. I don't know, but I mean, just taking the stuff kind of on its face and looking at it, and it's definitely suggestive of something's going on there. And but I was saying on Hoaxbusters call a couple times I've spoken about it, is that what kind of stands out to me about the whole thing is the timing of it. Like, okay, so this is all coming out at like a week before the phony baloney presidential election psychological operation mass media circus event,
Mm-hmm.
Which that's the way I characterize it. I don't think the president. This is just based on my opinion, my thoughts, that I don't think the presidential elections are anything more than an exercise in social conditioning. It's not to decide anything as far as the way the country is going to be run. I absolutely do not believe that. There's absolutely no evidence for that, for one thing. But there is a lot of evidence that it is a psychological operation. It's an exercise in social conditioning and social engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Is why these productions are put on, and it requires participation by voting. It's sort of this ritual event as well. I see a lot of parallels to even the spirit cooking thing that was spoken about, like the Maria Abramovich. Like, if you look at, what is she primarily supposed to be involved in, is this so-called performance art.
Mm-hmm.
And so the focus was with the WikiLeaks revelations that Podesta was invited to one of these spirit cooking ritual things, and so so it's okay, drawing people's attention to it, and the specific components of that were laid out there in one video that supposedly shows this Abramovich character painting phrases on the wall with blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it was interesting, the parallels between some of the stuff that was put out on display and the ritual of voting. I thought that was interesting. Like, it said something to the effect that, the spirit cooking ritual, and if you look into the way she speaks of these rituals or these performance art pieces or whatever, and they're not. She says they're performance art pieces when they're done in public, but then if they're done in private, they're actual rituals. But
yeah,
she makes reference to making this concoction and eating it or consuming it on an earthquake night. And there was an earthquake on the night of the election, and there was it says something about taking a knife and stabbing in your left hand and eating the pain. And then we've seen during this particular election cycle that there was all this talk about how the left was, or people that were counting on Hillary Clinton getting elected, being really in just emotional anguish and turmoil over the whole thing. And I thought that was an interesting parallel to those different aspects of the spirit cooking thing. So, I got thinking about it. It's like, what is voting, but except for some sort of ritual event? It's this big mass public ritual, and then you look at you have to go back in the old dictionaries, and I got a write up on this on hoaxbusterscall.com. You have to go back into the older posts to look at that, and it's did you vote? ? You just got spirit cooked, and then I was just pointing all this different stuff out, but you go in the old dictionaries and you look up the word vote, and it's suggestive of some sort of religious practice where you're offering up like petitions to this sort of false god, which I would call this construct of government. And it's like this false god, and people put all these false hopes and make these petitions toward this false god. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, it is like a sort of a religious ritual of sorts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's that. I mean, but you know, at the same time, you're talking about the timing of these so-called, you know, revelations about this you know, this witchcraft, this ritual, and this, you know, and then supposedly what happened is people kind of took the ball and ran with it with the emails, and they discovered there's this pizza place in the vicinity of Washington D.C., and then there's like all these pizza references in these emails, and then, you know, oh, we've uncovered this pedophile ring. But I think what they've done is basically reopened, you know, kind of peeking under the carpet or looking under the creaky boards of the haunted house that is the government and then is, you know, the United States or whatever you want to say, and look at this, you know, very repugnant aspect of it, you know, which is the sex trafficking rings, and that include children and all that. And, you know, this has been exposed before, you know, with the Franklin cover-up scandal and all that. And I got to think about this whole thing, too. And it's like, well, what if you do this? You type in, I type into Google, youth counselor charged sexual abuse. And if you just do that one simple thing, you'll get just article after article after article. What does it say? 140,000 results. Just different news articles where youth counselors have been charged with sexual abuse. So, I mean, not to downplay the idea of this sex trafficking ring. Don't get me wrong, but I think that, you know, within this construct called government, I mean, you have people that are identified as government, and it's sort of common knowledge that these designated individuals aren't held to the same standard of, you know, quote unquote law as everybody else, right?
Oh, case in point, Hillary Clinton.
Right. So, you know, and they tell you this in your face, you know, they show you, oh, she broke the law and here's how she did it. And this is definitely, well, one of the big things too is they could show you like where other people have done lesser things and had some pretty severe penalties and went to jail. But, you know, here's this evidence that Hillary Clinton did the same thing, but she's not going to jail. So, and I think that's done for a reason, and it's to reinforce that into people's minds, and also to reestablish that the fact that, you know, we're in this system, we're powerless to do anything about it. And I think that's what this pedophile ring thing coming out in the timing of it is, in one respect, designed to do. It's like, okay, oh yeah, here's this, or here's things suggestive of it. I mean, strongly suggestive of it, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, like, it causes me to think of all of this in terms of again, I use this a lot, this term psychological operation, because I think that's what we're looking at, especially when you look at what WikiLeaks is in reality. I mean, is it this independent group that's sort of outside of the establishment that is leaking things to the public that they're not supposed to know about, and that the news media has no choice but to report on it? I don't think so. I don't think there exists anything like that. Not that there wouldn't ever be leaks, but if there are leaks, they don't get any media attention. I mean, real leaks, you know. I think the ones that are put out there are done for a specific reason. But, you know, like Jay's talked about this on his. He made a video on it on. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's in his YouTube, where on WikiLeaks, where he has clips of CIA, so-called ex-CIA, talking about how WikiLeaks is a CIA operation and that Julian Assange is a front man.
Mm-hmm.
And Julian Assange himself has some real interesting pedigree as far as his upbringing in this sort of LSD mind control cult called I think it's called the Family. And his parents were all involved in that. Very, very bizarre background on that guy. So,
and he was a hacker, and that's often the time these hackers get caught, then they're given a deal, right?
Right, yeah. So whether he is some sort of an actor that's sort of as positioned as the front man for all of this, that's what I tend to think. Is he a real hacker? I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. But yeah, I mean, looking at all this stuff is, I guess, the point I'm trying to make is it has psychological operation writ large all over it. So, I mean, there's that. I mean, so, but yeah, the thing is, I was bringing up with, typing in youth counselor, sexual abuse, stuff like that. This is something that's commonplace throughout our system. I mean, I could probably dig around and look at local, youth, anything involving children that are kind of taken out of their homes and put in some kind of institution or so. You got to, if you dig around long enough and you look around and investigate, you're going to find abuse. It's something that's just a part of our current system, and unfortunately, it's very. I feel that it's very widespread. It's not something that's isolated to DC, and I think it's even probably global. And it's just the nature of our system. It's like when you get into a type of system that we have where, children are just handed over to strangers that have no real investment in these children other than, some sort of job or role. And it's like whatever they're kind of inclined toward, they can get away with, because we also have a condition in our culture and our society where, like, if a cop is accused, or a social worker or a teacher is accused, there's a high standard of proof that has to be put out to indict these people. So there was a recent character that was brought up on charges for this very thing, molesting children, and this is locally here in Lawton, Oklahoma, and he was. I recently went and looked up where the status was on that. I couldn't find anything about it, but I do recall it vividly that he was in some sort of government position as a youth counselor, and that of course, he was. I think what happened was that he got so brazen and so bold with his soliciting of sex from young boys that he was going on Facebook and putting posts on it. And it's like everybody could see it. And it's like, okay, hang on. I guess we got to put this guy in jail. I think that's what happens. I get, like in the case of Sandusky, I think he got so brazen and so out in the open that they had to put the brakes on it and put the dude in jail.
And stop the investigation there.
Yeah, and then stop the investigation there. Like, never mind the fact that this went on for years and years and years, and they can have people testify that they were abused years ago. So where was everybody else? Where's all the good people in government? Well, they're keeping it quiet.
And don't ask any questions about the dead prosecutor who was looking into it.
So the prosecutor ended up dead on the Sandusky thing, huh?
Yeah. There's a dead prosecutor whose disc went missing, his computer drive went missing or something. They found him floating in a river a few weeks later or something, and it's unsolved. But he,
maybe another good reason why you don't want to really go digging around in this stuff, too much, because there's nobody there to protect you. The system is not going to protect you. This is something that's an integral part of our system. And I spend a lot of time railing against the system or the government and pointing out that it's invalid. It's based on a bunch of unfounded, fallacious logic and reasoning, and you got a system that's based on an unfounded premise that's established on circular logic and illogic and total devoid of a reason coherent, social construct. It's not coherent anyway. Yeah, you're going to have the most outrageous conduct and behavior that's going to be just a regular part of the system, and I think that's something that is generally not going to be pointed out. It's not going to be. See, now this, to me, knowing about this stuff and having it out there is okay. It's not surprising to me. I myself have been on the receiving end of some of this abuse and some of these institutions, so I know how callous people can be when they're positioned in those places. Well, they had the Stanford prison experiment showed that, demonstrated that quite well. I think that was legit, and that's really how it goes, with that particular type of these artificial social constructs that are, erected.
Yeah, you give someone a uniform and give them a pair of sunglasses and a baton or something, or a cattle prod, or
and it goes to their head. It's like, why? Well, it's something about it. It's something I can't say it's human nature because it's an artificial contrived situation, though, right?
Yeah.
And then you couple that with the fact that, like, if a cop is accused or a teacher is accused, then people will rally to the defense of the judge or the cop or the teacher or whoever gets accused. And I mean, we've seen that time and time again too. I mean, there was a judge. I talked about that on a while back that was brought up on pedophilia charges. He got some kind of ridiculously light sentence. And there was all these people there that were talking about how great of a guy he was and how much he did for the community and everything. And there was just endless defenders of this pedophile,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's instructive of the system we live in, It's so, yeah, that's why I've, after, like I was telling you, I've thought about it and I've kind of developed my thoughts on this, and like, the people in generally aren't going to talk about even, they make this a total indictment of the system, which I think that's what it should rightly be. It shouldn't be. It definitely shouldn't be partisan. That's absolutely preposterous, man. The people that are putting this Pizzagate information out and they're couching it within the confines of partisanship. That's absolutely ridiculous. As if the DNC and Democrats are somehow more guilty on this type of stuff. It's like that is absurd, because you have to forget that, okay, where's the FBI? Where's the police in DC? Where are these people? Are they all friggin' Democrats?
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
First, if you get into the details of Pizzagate, there is these emails, and the text of these emails are hard to, if you read them literally, they make no sense. They obviously is some sort of code language being utilized, and some people have deciphered the code words. And according to some reports, some of these words are sort of street lingo, or some sort of nomenclature for organized pedophilia. Like pizza, hot dogs,
Mm-hmm.
Walnut, and who I think one email actually referenced a party where children were being brought, and they specified the age, and the children were referred to as entertainment.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how one can reconcile that. Since when are children entertainment? One is email with John Podesta. There is a napkin with his map on it that a realtor mentioned, which seemed to me like some sort of veiled blackmail or something. And then I think the email says he wasn't too concerned about it. A napkin with a map on it, or a handkerchief with a map on it. And I think I understand his map is often referred to as DNA. It's a DNA map of someone's DNA. There's one email that's refers to playing dominoes on pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, makes no sense. That, coupled with the fact of, at least what I've seen, the provenance of these emails has not been challenged, or these Instagrams. The debunking that I've heard is, this is outrageous. Typical fever swamp stuff you get from the internet, where accusations are being levied, lives are being ruined, outrageous charges. Again, if you're familiar with the history of this stuff, it's not outrageous because these things do exist. Mm-hmm. But they don't address the emails, nor are they challenging that the emails have been faked. No one, even those accused, these I haven't come across, they haven't said these aren't Instagrams, aren't our emails. there are their emails. So no one's really explained the text of these emails. It seems to me if there was a genuine or effort to investigate the stuff, there's some real good faith effort on part of the constituted authorities, the FBI, the DC police, to go in there. This would be enough grounds for a warrant to go in there and just look and check the place out before the evidence can be destroyed. But that hasn't been done. Like you said, you get the scandal and you get the outrage on the internet, but there's no investigation, no effort on the authorities. And then it just goes away. And what are we left with?
Yeah, I mean, we got to kind of look down the road further of how this is going to all kind of play out. And I think, there's not going to be any, mass arrest forthcoming. I think the hope for that is really to be seriously self-deluded. That is not going to happen.
Well, look at the Clinton Foundation. What's been exposed to that? There's been no indictments. And this links to the Clinton Foundation because it links to the child trafficking effort or ring that the Clinton Foundation seems to be tied to, because to this woman, what's her name, down in Haiti, where she apparently kidnapped 33 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the Clinton Foundation went to bat for her. And so there's a tie-in there, but there's no real investigation on this.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, I mean, just looking at the I think it's kind of a big deal to have the logo the same as the pedophile logo.
Yeah.
And then people are pointing out that, here it is on the FBI site. So it's like, how would you know about it unless the FBI, you're looking at the FBI stuff.
Yeah, here's Laura Silsby was her name. I'm sorry. Laura
Silsby.
Former director of the New Life Children's Refuge. This is an example of another one of these institutions that you referenced, Child Protective Services, schools, these things. These are institutions that are at least that are advertised as protecting children, but they're the exact opposite.
Yeah, and then if you kind of just stop to think a minute about it, like where would a real child predator gravitate toward a job like that, right? Either as a coach at your local high school, or I'm not saying that means everybody that's a coach or a teacher is a pederast, but
it's going to attract that type.
Yeah, it's naturally going to attract that type. And then, well, look at Sandusky. Wasn't he this gregarious, outgoing, likable sort of goofball guy that was very, very popular individual?
Psychological. I mean, I've heard people who knew him, and if you study the MO of a pederast or a child molester, often it is gregariousness, charitable attitudes. You give things, you take them out to lunch. It's a whole strategy, and he seemed to follow that strategy. So, and they target vulnerable children, whether it's, or in this case down in Haiti, they weren't even orphans. That's what got her in trouble. They had parents, but often the Silsby character. But his, what was it, the Second Mile Foundation or something? Was it the Second Mile Foundation that he operated?
That sounds right. Yeah, I looked into a little bit of his deal, and then it also said that his father was heading up some kind of charitable organization group that dealt with youth and stuff like that. That might have been that Second Mile Foundation. Might be. I'm not sure.
So they target marginalized, vulnerable people, children who don't have anyone to care for them, to go to bat for them, to protect
and nobody's going to speak out for them. I mean, they could talk about it all they want. It's like people go on about like, oh, there can't be hidden secrets within government because somebody would speak out. It's like, well, what's going to happen when you do speak out? Nothing.
Well, that's another indication when people do speak out. Good example is the Franklin scandal when I think it was Alicia Owens was her name. She got 20 years in prison for perjury because she wouldn't recant her accusations. So you have that too. So like, what's the point? You know what I mean? So that's a good reference there when you want to deal with somebody that's telling you that this whole if you talk, not to go off the subject, but the moon landing or something, so, oh, that can't be right because somebody would have spoke out by now. It's like, well, what about the Sandusky thing? How many years did that go on, and how horrible is that? I mean, that's a horrible
thing to have that a child abuse go on for years and years, and nobody. You mean it went on all those years and nobody talked about it? How is that possible?
Well,
so either you got to like dismiss the whole thing and say the guy really didn't do anything. He was, for some bizarre reason, he's charged, or then you accept what the official thing was, and it says no, he was abusing kids for years and years, decades.
Yeah,
and people kept quiet.
Despite whistleblower protection laws, the whistleblowers are not treated very well in this country.
No.
Yeah, I mean, good example is John Carricker. I think it was the CIA guy who exposed the torture. He went to jail for 3 years for violating his security, but he exposed crimes, and but that didn't matter. He was indicted and convicted and went into jail, lost his career, and just look at it from a practical standpoint. Let's say you're a police officer, you're a good cop, and you're aware of corruption. Mm-hmm. If you actively speak up against, what's going to happen in your career? What's going to happen to your what may happen to your life? Because you're stepping on everyone's deal, their good deal they have going. And as a practical matter, is every day you have to deal with your peers, your coworkers, and you don't deal with the public. The public trust. That's not your friend. That's not your community. That's not your career. That's not your friends. It's not your family. And so it's very hard to speak up against these things because you're going against the tide. And it's much harder when the law doesn't protect you. Despite the fact what the law reads, you don't get protected. You lose your career, and you often go to jail if you do. Especially if you have a security clearance and you have that agreement there where you sign that agreement. Although when they tell you sign it, though, you're not really obligated to cover up crimes. If you see wrongdoing, you're a whistleblower. But the law doesn't really protect you. Nor you don't get any means of support if you lose your job.
Yeah, and the public at large really won't support you either. So, you have to point out what would the incentive be for people to come out and put their neck out and stand up for the truth and try to expose anything. There's no incentive to, especially when we live in a culture where people are most comfortable having their head jammed firmly up their rear ends, on any of this stuff. Like this Pizzagate stuff. I mean, I tend to think there's something to it. I don't see how there can't be anything to it. I just think that it's very suspicious about how it got exposed or how
there's an agenda behind it, or perhaps several. I heard an interesting theory that somehow that Trump, and like you said, that we don't elections don't decide who gets to be president. What they do is but they are indication, perhaps, that a decision has been taken by some group, some change of course, or something different, or some different political strategy behind the oligarchy. So, a good example is Donald Trump's upset victory could be a sign that elements within the deep state and the oligarchy had decided, well, we can't really back Hillary anymore. She's too corrupt, or she's just won't be useful to us. Let's have this. And there might be some elements within the deep state or within the oligarchy that decide that maybe we need some retrenchment, a change in policy, which could yield some superficial reforms or changes in policy. But at the end of the day, the oligarchy is still in charge. But the leaks themselves, one thing they did regarding some of the things with Hillary damaged her. I think did her campaign some severe damage in the final weeks of the campaign, which might have given Trump enough votes to win the election in some key states. But there's some other things too that a good example of that in North Carolina. Remember all that nonsense regarding the the bathrooms and the transgendered bathrooms and all that. Well, North Carolina went for Trump, and people in North Carolina have just been fed up. Of course, the Obama administration then sues on behalf of LGBT community, creates a whole other controversy by misinterpreting the civil rights law regarding education. And they're going to cut off federal funds to public schools in North Carolina if they don't have transgendered bathrooms. So this creates a whole other controversy. This changes I can see how that might change the politics in North Carolina and give enough votes to Trump. So he wins. So the state that went for Obama in 08 and 12 went for Trump in 16. So these, so there's some activity going with electoral politics, but you're right. I think it's as long as you're playing within their arena, and they allow some maneuverability. But as regarding Trump, some people say that Trump had some connections with the NYPD, and so he's sort of like got it leaked. His camp got it leaked, or his team, whatever.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and so there's some intrigue there. Some intrigue that this is enough to get it leaked for a reason. But overall, like your point is taken, that there's not going to be an investigation. There's not going to be warrants served. There's not going to be indictments, and we're not going to see John Podesta being frog marched out of his palatial home anytime soon.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
I mean, and then I mean, that should communicate to folks that the so-called law enforcement is just completely illegitimate. I would hope, but see that I don't think that's the conclusions that are going to be drawn. I think that it's just gonna kind of go along. It's going to be put out there. It's either the thing about it too. It is there's enough information that's put out there that to get people to be sort of energized on kind of like finding out, getting to the bottom of it, finding out, but nothing like exactly incriminating, is there? Like,
yeah. Well, like I said, presumption of innocence applies in a court of law. It doesn't apply to me. I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't have that burden. I'm not. I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the paintings on the wall, which not disputing, by the way, or the artwork at that place. And I'm going to say there's something really weird going on there, and it's inappropriate and perverse. You think the neighbor would come in with torches and chase them out or something, something like maybe But I'm not again. Yeah, but the only problem is the normal processes aren't being followed. You seem to me, if I were to present this evidence, and good example, if there is a report of rats at this place, or you'd sooner get the health department going and shutting it down over that issue than this.
yeah.
Or restaurant. So there's enough evidence. I think, like I said earlier, there's enough evidence there to justify a warrant and an investigation. We're not getting that because there might be a reason why this guy Elefante is so influential because
of blackmail.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would make sense. I don't know how it makes sense that he's in the top 50 most powerful people in D.C. when he owns a pizza place. It doesn't really make sense. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of indicators. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't deny it. I mean, I think I think one really important aspect of it, though, is that and the way this is being played. Because we're being played, no doubt about it, with this stuff. I mean, in my mind, there's just no doubt about that the public is being played here. Now, and if you look at the so-called mainstream press or the Huffington Post and all these kind of liberal leftist blogs and all this stuff and how they're dealing with it, is this poor pizza shop owner.
Yeah.
That his only crime is making a decent pizza and trying to have business and play little games and blah blah blah. And so he's got all these rabid nutter alt-righter basement dwelling just whatever pejorative term you can throw out there about these people that are looking into this stuff. And positioning this Alefantis character as a victim. And, me and Jay were talking about this, and he said, Jay was pointing out, I said, that is the part of the process to get sympathy. If you have somebody being attacked, you have a victim, and you get sympathy for the victim, right? Because that's always called for. Mm-hmm. And among other things, this we got to address that, and he's openly gay, right? So you have that thrown in there.
He's had a relation with this guy David Brock, who's an interesting character.
Yeah, so you have that, and then that is sort of the standard procedure for what's characterized as left-wing politics is to position themselves as the victim, and women are victims, and minorities are victims, and gays are victims, and transgenders are victims, and what's next on the list? It's pedophiles are victims. Pedophiles themselves are victims. So,
and that's already out there, at least in the academic journals and articles, and
there's already mainstream articles saying that very thing, suggestive of it at least, that pedophiles themselves aren't victimizers, but they themselves are victims.
And the children are only traumatized because of society's values.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing I don't think people are quite aware of, because this is so atrocious and so just outlandish. It's like, how could this ever be accepted into mainstream society? Well, it's part of a process. And I think what we're looking at is part of the process. It's like, okay, just like with homosexuals, there was a famous case. Dang it. I have a hard time with names and places and stuff. I probably need to work on that. But, there was some club or something like that. And it's kind of like this.
Stonewall.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Tim. Yeah.
1969 Stonewall riots. But that was also a center of child trafficking and drugs.
Well, there you go. Right. So, but then what was...
That's why the cops were so tough on them, by the way.
Yeah. So, but then, no, they were victims, see? Now they were... Now that is sort of their... part of their lore, sort of their civil rights sort of movement sort of thing.
Yeah, they were picking up on that in the streets, protesting civil rights, Martin Luther King approach.
Right. And they align themselves with the civil rights movement and stuff like that. And all the arguments and all the positioning and all the strategy and everything that was used to get where we are today in 2016, where we're seeing now, if you're, I see this all the time. I don't even watch TV, and I see, I was just the other day, I was watching this ad, and it was just blatantly over the top, like promoting homosexual in just a really kind of off-putting to me. I don't know. And it was just like this bank for a credit card. And it was just really kind of strange. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, how does this, because advertising, you got to kind of have mass appeal, right? That's kind of
why are they doing that?
Yeah. Why are they doing that? So how are they going to get a lot of people on board with that by their flagrant, advocation of gay and gay relation, gay themes and all that. This is not mainstream, even though it's. But see, it's part of a process, though.
Yeah, I was. This is a little another topic, but it's goes towards your point of normalization of things. Is I was at the gym on the treadmill, and there's a TV on, and I just had the volume down. It was early in the morning, and listening to some of these ads. Some ad for some technology company. And I don't know the context of it because the volume was down. I could just see, and it's just it comes the screen. It's just two frames, one side almost like a Skype call type thing, and the son is on the phone, and a little black boy is on the phone calling, and all of a sudden pops up, and there's the father, and the father, or an adult male, who I would take to be the father. And they're talking, and he's talking, and all of a sudden, behind him, he's like in a hallway with stairs, and it looks like an institutional setting. All of a sudden, a crowd of people in orange jumpsuits start walking behind him. And what I can gather is he's calling his dad in prison. And it says something technologies, because connection, keeping in touch matters. And this idea is that you're normalizing the idea of being in prison, and somehow this technology is going to make up for this. This dysfunctional relationship that this child has because his father happens to be in prison. But it's normalized. This is an ad for like a technology company.
That's
and I thought, wait a second.
Wow. Well, I mean, there's so many people in prison. Don't we have like 15% of all the prisoners in the world are in the United States? So that's definitely like a demographic that maybe needs to be appealed to now.
But
I guess.
But you're normalizing instead of addressing why is this so? Why is there such a large prison population? Why is such a large percentage of prison population black males? Instead of addressing that matter, this technology would just make it a lot easier.
I know it's insane.
I'm thinking normalizing this stuff. It's just like normalizing. If you see like going an ad, the weak dumb husband will be holding the baby, and the one asking the questions will be the woman. You know?
Oh yeah. Well, you see that in just interviews and everywhere. Like anything you see on that's been presented on TV, like and then there's a couple and the interview. Yeah, so it's the women doing all the talking, and the guy's kind of just sitting in the background with his mouth shut, and it's very I know to pick up on that
stupid.
too.
And he's stupid.
And he's stupid, yeah, stupid. And
So.
well, yeah, I mean, so. If you were to just look at media and regular sitcoms and the fare that's put out there on on television and cable and stuff like that, you would probably come away with the impression that like at least 30% of the people in the country are homosexual, gay.
Yeah.
The way it's so overrepresented, right? I mean, it's incredible. See, I mean, it took a while to get to this point of normalization.
Well, I think John made the point. At first, they were introduced with comedy. You know, like you had characters that were always kind of, was it Uncle Al on Bewitched, right? And different comedy characters. But then you have drama. They're the victims. You saw that in the 70s and 80s, legitimizing that. And then there was, of course, you had Will and Grace, right? Remember that show?
Yeah.
I never watched it much, but obviously how it portrays it, it's like, if you watch any of the shows, it's the homosexuals that are emotionally mature, have normal relationships, and it's the heterosexuals who are neurotic and vulnerable, and it's
course,
okay, yeah,
that's. And then you look at this stuff, and it's like, well, it is so promoted in the media. It's just very overtly and very blatantly, and I think people have a hard time with the idea that even pedophilia can go through this process and end up. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take. I have no idea, but I see this developing, and what you also see too is the arguments that are made. And like you said, it's like I was watching this one deal Jay referred me to, and it was a 60-minute special that was Australia 60 Minutes, talking about pedophile rings and all that. And they were interviewing advocates of pedophilia, the people that want it, that want the laws done away with in regards to age of consent and all that stuff. And their argument was what is twisted and it's bizarre, but it's like you mentioned it before. It was like, well, it's like the reason why children are upset when they're abused or sexually engaged by an adult is because of the societal view on it. Same argument they made for homosexuality, because if you look at homosexuality, there's very, very extremely high rates of depression, suicide, alcoholism, drug abuse among identified gays, homosexuals. And so you have to address that instead of like what it was always typically. Homosexuality is just kind of another symptom of a broken psyche. It's an expression of a mental damage that was incurred at youth, and that was kind of always what it was. It was identified as in the the Diagnosis Statistical Manual and all that for psychiatry and all that until relatively recently.
In 1973, and that this change was only made for political reasons. There were no new findings or anything.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's never been scientifically established that there's a real definable biological basis for it.
And that was based on sort of just an observation of natural law, meaning that sexuality is there for procreation, and obviously male to male, female, homosexuality is not procreative. But that also goes with the creation of the contraceptive culture and the separation from sex from procreation, which was a gradual process as well.
Something I kind of like to make appeal to regularly is just basic common sense. just basic natural law and common sense. I mean, that tells you that.
And the morality that sprang from that is, well, morality has been called practical reason. And there are things that we observe, certain types of behavior, deviant behavior, unnatural behavior, that are going to have certain consequences. So from that, we derive, bad consequences. There are bad consequences. There are bad consequences because it's wrong. Okay, it's not wrong because of bad consequences. So what happens is, from that you derive some sort of moral lesson or principle about how one should behave. That goes with diet, how you behave. It goes with murder and stealing and even matters sexual. Under the new dispensation that we're all living under, somehow magically was imposed. All notions of sexual morality are now become, or these traditional ideas of sexual morality have become bigoted views.
Yeah, so the whole thing has been taken and turned inside out.
Yeah, inversion.
Inversion.
Yeah.
And so that's how you have to look at this stuff, because I think people have a hard time with the idea that pedophilia will ever be normalized in the same way that homosexuality has been normalized. But that is the process that we are currently undergoing as we speak.
Yeah, and despite the fact you look at the trend towards fat girls, particularly for girls fashion, music videos, they're all
sexualized
children.
Yeah.
Now this also coincides with well, if you look at the sexualization of children, is that began, I think, overtly with the introduction of so-called sexual education in the 1970s. And although ostensibly it was done to address the problem of teenage pregnancy, it only, by its own standards, it has failed, because it led to the increase of teenage pregnancy. It's also led to the introduction of, the normalization of sexual behavior among the youth. This also coincides with pop culture, entertainment promoting all this stuff. But a good example is Life magazine. I think 1971 had the cover of teen pregnancy in high school. It's on the cover of the magazine to address the problem of it. Right?
Yeah.
I think Time magazine did the same thing called children having children in the 80s. And this is another thing, the same way that Life magazine addressed the issue of psychedelic drugs in the 50s to set the stage for the 60s. This is a form of cultural programming. This is promoting the idea. It's getting it out there. It's the same thing that you mentioned with these various scandals, where it gets it out there, everyone's slimed with it, and it changes everyone's behavior because it changes public morality.
Yeah, that's the. I think this victimization thing is important, because I think that's the thin edge of the wedge, so to speak, to get this issue in there. So first, you have to, and that's what they've been actively doing is positioning the pedophile, which would people typically think are just the repulsive, repugnant offenders of common decency and everything. And now position them as the victim. And then you have, because that's where they always come at you from, right? The victim, everybody's a victim. And what that does is sort of like makes this appeal, this emotional appeal to that people are conditioned. They have preconditioned to resonate with them. This victim, if somebody can be characterized as a victim, you can gain solidarity and sympathy and solidarity with these people by way of just simply characterizing and portraying them as a victim. So
and if your identity is your sexual orientation, and if you have a moral view or even a respect towards, let's say, the natural law, that you find that behavior repulsive, unnatural, and not something you want to promote, you become the bigot.
Yeah, and that's why there's been this conditioning process to come up with these terms of like gender identity or sexual orientation, or to make that a part of an integral part of a person's identity. But it's like, why would you do that? Because that's how you get the political positioning, the strategizing. That's how it's all set up. It's not. There's no there's no like scientific basis for doing any of that or any logical, reason through position as far as that goes. It's just all kind of it's just all this groundwork is being laid over the years to get us to where we're at today. So
there was a thing called it's the Jaffe Memo. I think it's a 1969 meeting of Planned Parenthood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the Planned Parenthood had been commissioned by the federal government to address the population issue, the overpopulation. Mm-hmm. And in that meeting, the notes. Now, this is someone's notes, but it is claimed they discussed that how you reduce the population is you sexualize society. Now, of course, if you're coming from the standpoint that sex means more babies, that's not possible. But again, if you separate sex from procreation and you promote contraception, and in this talk they talked about promoting contraception, promoting homosexuality. Now, how do you promote homosexuality? It talked about increasing the divorce rate, weakening the family, promoting sexual activity among elderly people, Viagra, right?
Oh, okay.
All this stuff. It's a broad cultural program through entertainment, through the educational institutions, to fundamentally change, almost make society go through an alchemical process. Mm-hmm. And you do that, and of course you can increase sexual dysfunction, disorientation through trauma, and of course if you promote things like family breakup and divorce, you're going to increase the incidences of people being sexually abused, not having fathers around. And if you have so if you go from a divorce rate in the single digits that it was maybe in the 1960s to 50% that it is today, mm-hmm. You're going to have families that are dysfunctional, families that are different, unique, as they say. You're going to have situations where people are, they don't have fathers, they're subject to more abuse, and they're more traumatized, and from that becomes greater sexual disorientation. So you have a toxic culture. That coupled with a literal toxic environment with chemicals, which may be gender-bending chemicals like endocrine mimickers or disruptors, or estrogen mimickers that disrupt in utero the infusion of male hormones into the brain at a certain time of the baby's development, and babies can actually be born with sort of sexual disorientation.
Yeah.
That manifests itself later on, and then they can be nurtured by psychologists in schools. That if a boy identifies or acts in a feminine manner, or a girl is a tomboy, well, then they're immediately thrown into the tender mercies of a school psychologist, who tells them they really are psychologically a female. Maybe they should get surgery or just dress like a girl. And if this is encouraged in the media, and parents and family members are confused, you're going to get a lot more people being confused. So.
Yeah, I've read up some on this, and interesting thing that was brought out in one of these papers I was reading was talking about South America, and they said, well, South America, they traditionally, I don't know if things have changed recently, but like some anthropological studies and stuff that's been done down there in regards to homosexuality. So like they had like a really low instance of it. And they attributed to that because of the social dynamics that exist in that culture, is that young boys that get together for playing in the street or whatever, it was observed that they typically don't ostracize another boy if the boy doesn't display typical characteristics of what a idealized male would be. Like, they don't have to be great at throwing a ball through a hoop or anything like that in order for them to be accepted among the company of men or boys.
Yeah.
So there's something in their culture that says that if you are if just by simply being biologically a male, you are a male, and you are going to be accepted in the company of males. Now, we in the United States, we've been conditioned mostly through television and movies and stuff like that not to do that. So it's almost, and then we've also now have recently incorporated this gay identity false construct.
Yeah.
So that like, then you have it set up where I think this is very important what goes on in institutions with young people, because that's part of how people are brought up and developed and how their minds are shaped, is that you could be ostracized and rejected out of the company of men just by being too frail or too skinny or being into things that aren't typically characterized as quote unquote, male,
Mm-hmm.
And they say that is the sort of very instrumental in the formation of people's development that will actually do more to engender homosexual behavior or idealization, or can't say that word, but anyway, that does more to do that than anything else, is this peer rejection process. And they said that's why in South America you don't have that many identified homosexuals, but in this culture you do. So it's like, yeah, it's social dynamics are crucial to determining that. But see, but then you could point out too that like youth in this country typically have a lot more media exposure
Mm-hmm.
than anywhere else in the world. So
and also what they lack is in maybe more traditional societies would have rites of passage and traditions that by virtue of being a boy you'd go through, by virtue of being a girl you'd go through. And I guess maybe it's part of the liberal mindset that somehow that everyone should have choice in these things. And despite the fact that there's nature and boy and girl and that's it, we've reached the, I guess you could say, the reduction ad absurdum of the Enlightenment, of liberalism, that you can actually choose your gender or sex. Even the word gender in these things is a sign that because gender was used for language, it wasn't used for used to have sex on forms. What's your sex? Sex is concrete; it's there. Gender is fluid, right? Gender. So that's another example of social programming.
Yeah, and it's really has no logical foundation to it. I mean, if you could, so that it's part of your biology, yet you can identify as something that you are clearly not. Is like like people can identify themselves as being like Napoleon Bonaparte and walk around.
Yeah, why can't I do that and get a job? Expect to get a job.
Or expect people to defer to you and speak French to you when they're in their company, even though you're clearly not Napoleon. It used to be called mental illness, and there are people that actually would go around doing that. But see, no, we recategorize and redefine everything so that is considered, quote unquote, normal. But yet you can't. Here's one thing, and then to kind of point out the arbitrary nature of it all. It's like. So someone tried to. It was like a white woman that tried to pass herself off as being black, and they said, "Oh, that's like somehow a criminal act, almost like she had really crossed the line and violated something very sacrosanct within this progressive mindset." And I don't know if you remember that.
She was that the head of the NAACP or something? Or?
Yeah, she was actually white, and then she was trying to pass herself off as black. And they said, no, you can't do that. And it's like, well, if you can be a man,
I think that's less extreme than identifying as the opposite sex when you're another.
Yeah, that is a lot less extreme, I would think. And then
because it's like.
But no, that's for some reason biology is very, very extremely important. But then on the other hand, it's not. Well, let's see. It's arbitrary, capricious, and ridiculous, and nonsensical.
Well, you're obviously dealing with a malicious agenda here, and moral principles, or even logical considerations don't factor in because
because they get to define that too. Well, it's like it's always kind of reminiscent of 1984. It's like we tell you 2 + 2 = 5. It by God equals 5.
Well, it's like freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4, meaning that there are some external rules that no political party can change, and if you have that, there's some basis in reality, and from that you can challenge the party's authority, and that's why the party will brook no deviation from the party line, and they have to make the point. No, if the party says 2 + 2 equals 5, it does equal 5. You better say it. Not only that, we'll torture you to the point where you actually believe it, not just say it.
Yeah,
right?
you can't just say it. You have to actually believe it.
And that speaks today where how people feel so compelled to to accept the claims of the LGBT community or whatever community. These they're just absurd. Right? I mean, that you have to accept that you have to call someone a woman if they say they're a woman, but shouldn't language reflect reality? I mean, you're not a woman.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what about science? So what about your XY chromosomes and stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, kind of...
And even in the news where someone has a sex change, they start calling that person she or he. That's incorrect.
And then it gets really confusing. They'll say, this is a transgender male. It's like, well, and then I always have to stop and think, it's like, okay, were they originally a woman or are they originally a male that's transgendered into a woman? See, it just gets, that's where you end up when you get into these absurdist redefinitions of things that have no basis in logic. You get a lot of confusion, and then people, they don't know how to, you run into a situation where, like, I do at my local store over here, there's a checkout person. It's like, I can't really tell if they're male or female. I honestly don't know. Mm-hmm. So I have to kind of be cautious around them. And then I was like, because it could be a female or it could be a younger guy, but then like females will cut their hair really short like that. So it's like, so you get into these situations where like, and I think this person's name is Madison, which I guess could be a girl or a guy's name. So it's like this situation where so am I going to offend somebody? But it's like I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or offend anybody.
Well, that's most people take a live and let live attitude towards these things. But
that's what I'm saying. Is like they're
the ones practicing cultural aggression because they want the schools, they want the force of law, they want anti-discrimination laws protecting them so that they can go out and carry on and dress whatever the hell they want and expect to find gainful employment and get people to like them. You have to love me. No, I don't. Or making people bake them a cake for them or give them flowers. Like, really, you can't find a florist that's tolerant of gay people? I find that hard to believe. You can't find a bakery that's tolerant of go to another bakery if that person doesn't want to do business. Why would you want someone who doesn't want to do business with you to make your cake? Obviously, the issue is more than that. It's about compliance. Right? It goes back to making someone say that 2 + 2 = 5. That's
and then talking about proof and evidence is okay. So we're in 2016, and obviously, culturally speaking, the climate that's especially from the media, or if you go to especially to certain cities, the attitudes toward acceptance of queer identity or whatever you want to call it is way different than it was a couple of decades ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, where are all the studies coming out showing that, since, we have this level of greater acceptance towards the LGBT community, we've noticed a precipitous decline in the instances of depression and all these other things that are typically associated with gay. Do they even bring that up? No,
because it hasn't.
No, because it's not important. It's like none of that has any relevance in it because, like, when I was talking about this subject before, it was like we were talking about how there would be stories that would come out in Time magazine and stuff like that, suggesting that there's this such thing as a gay gene. Except for, of course, it's not backed up on any like real solid science or anything. Mm-hmm. But see, they could put it on the front page cover, and they could put it out there, and then people they kind of passively consume media, so they just they could base a whole a thought construct that's based on looking at a cover of a magazine. They don't have to read the article or whatever. Say, gay gene, it looks like they've proven it, and then it's like they've ascertained that just by walking by the news counter and seeing the cover of the magazine.
Yeah.
It's really that simplistic as far as how propaganda works, and because people simply don't have time really practically to go into studying these issues or anything extensively.
Yeah, I think Jay made that point I think it was on your show regarding Alfred Kinsey and Freud, how these people were proven to be wrong, in many cases frauds, in some cases criminal, but nevertheless their promotion of their ideas were enough to have the change in society's values, which was the objective.
Yeah, we're talking about how science that's how it's used.
Yeah.
I mean, then once you get past a certain phase of acceptance, then it's like not even referenced anymore.
No, yeah, I bring up Freud because I was doing just some reading up on this Pizzagate stuff and the Podestas. To go back to that. And apparently his grandson, who passed away in 2009, has an odd connection to that Madeleine McCann case. The girl went missing in Portugal.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Apparently, when she went missing in Portugal, this guy, Sir, what was his first name? He was a grandson of Sigmund Freud. He's a member of Parliament. And he had a villa a third of a mile away from the McCanns where they were staying. Now, he wasn't in Portugal at the time, but 2 or 3 days after she went missing, he called them up and asked them over for lunch to talk to them. I guess to console them or whatever. Well, it came out that he was a pedophile.
Okay.
And although he wasn't there, so he also shared an office with Cyril Smith as a member of Parliament. He was a member of Parliament. Cyril Smith. Didn't
he get...
He was exposed posthumously, of course.
Posthumously,
which is always the case, right? Savile?
Yeah.
Now, some people have made the connection that some people were claiming that the Podestas were in Portugal at that time. I'm not sure that's been confirmed yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what they're trying to say, maybe perhaps there's, because you've heard the thing where the descriptions. If you look at the descriptions of the people that were seen leaving the scene where she disappeared, they do kind of resemble Tony and John Podesta.
Well, my question would be, okay, now who are the people that identified those people for the police sketch?
Yeah.
And haven't they seen Podesta by now, since he's such a public figure?
Yeah.
And wouldn't they have already pinned him as the one, and wouldn't have they already gone to the quote-unquote authorities by now? Certainly they would have. So what's the point in even bringing this up?
It is easy to confirm that it seemed to be easy to confirm that they went to Port, but it just gets out there. But I do find it interesting that it is a fact that Sir Clement Freud, the former broadcaster and politician, was exposed as a pedophile. This was in the Telegraph, the London Telegraph. A pedophile who sexually abused girls as young as 10 for decades. This was exposed. He passed away in 2009. It was subsequently exposed. He did call the McCanns up, and they had lunch in 2007 after the 3-year-old girl went missing. So you have a pedophile calling them up and having lunch with them. Okay, that's a little odd. Yeah. He happens to be so close to them. Why would he do that? But that's another strange aspect to that story. Again, another one who's exposed posthumously, and of course, because this is the grandson of Sigmund Freud, is why I brought it up. The name rang a bell, but again, the back to this whole idea of what they're doing to society through all this programming. I brought this up a couple times in the interviews, but I do think it's important. Under the justification of AIDS, the whole AIDS scare, and you're probably familiar with the problems with the HIV hypothesis as a source for AIDS.
Oh yeah, that it's not really such a thing. It's just kind of like the treatment is what kills people.
Basically, people doing research is the problems, the AIDS itself. The AIDS never broke out of the gay ghettos, and it always afflicted people who were living rather the fast track lifestyle, or people who are immunodeficient, like hemophiliacs. But at all the casings of all the markings of someone who's just living, too much drugs, too much sex, just a reckless lifestyle, and their immune system was exhausted, and then their death was accelerated by things like AZT and these things. That's a whole other issue, but the AIDS scare itself was another form of social programming or traumatizing society, because it gave the impression that you could just go out and have sex and catch this disease and die from it. Mm-hmm. And this gave the excuse for the authorities to introduce a new level of sexual education to students, to adolescents. And this was written up in 1989. This was written up at the National Research Council produced a document, AIDS, sexual intravenous drug use. And in it, they talked about how the fear of the epidemic could be used to justify the implementation of sex ed programs and the addressing of certain topics to students and adolescents that parents would otherwise oppose. But the fear of the crisis would enable them to bring up these topics, to modify sex ed programs, bring up sexual issues to adolescents, bring up topics of things like sexual perversion, things like introducing condoms in the classroom and things like that.
Yeah, because it's life or death situation now. We got to get education on it. Yeah,
and it says ideally, the level of fears. What is not yet known is, this is what the document read, what is not yet known is how to introduce fear in the right way in a particular message intended for a particular audience. Acquiring the knowledge will require planned variations of age education programs that are carefully executed and carefully evaluated. The report went on to expose how to attach societal moral values and related to speaking of and writing about sexuality in explicit terms. Again, they were advocating a direct attack on the children, and the children and their parents' values. So again, the crisis was used as an excuse to introduce a program that would otherwise be opposed as being too explicit or inappropriate. So again, you have this sexualization of children.
Yeah, you have. So that's interesting to bring that up because not to go off topic, but I think it's in a similar vein with this these agendas, this problem reaction solution thing we see over and over, like with the school shootings. Now, a lot of this, I think, a lot of attention has been focused on banning guns and stuff like that, but then. At the same time, we got to look at, too, is these initiatives that are being pushed. You got this woman, Scarlett Lewis, that was supposedly had a child die at Sandy Hook, who's spearheading this, what is it called, something to do with some program or some legislation that's going to deal with, like, something along the lines of getting the schools involved with children's so-called emotional well-being and stuff.
Oh, so this is like a psychiatric or agenda here with probably with psychotropic drugs. There's a pharmaceutical interest here. That
I'm sure will be incorporated into this because that's anytime you hear mental health, it's automatically what should come to mind is drugging somebody because that's what they're talking about. So something that like you're saying with the AIDS thing and the sexual education, something that parents would probably normally be opposed to. But since it's been turned into this sort of life or death situation, and I think mainly that's the main reason why these school shootings are being conducted is to get everybody uptight about the potential a child that's mentally disturbed, engaging in a school shooting. That maybe we need this intervention. Maybe we need this. Maybe we need to have school teachers and counselors stuff all up in this mental health aspect of rearing children.
Yeah, and they can pathologize, otherwise normal behavior, like male behavior. Being a child doesn't like sitting in a chair for 6 hours a day. A boy wants to get up and play and move around a lot, and all of a sudden he's attention deficit disorder. He makes the with his fingers like a gun, and that becomes zero tolerance.
Yeah,
and as if that's somehow unnatural or dangerous. So normal horseplay, even to the point where they dispatch. And there's a whole industry behind this, probably because if all of a sudden now you need security guards at schools, police, and with all the apparatus of tanks and tear gas, and believe me, there'll be tanks at schools. That's gonna because someone can make a buck off it, right? They have tanks in small towns. Why not schools?
Maybe kids will go to schools in tanks.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be a whole industry
instead of a bus.
There'll be a whole need to be protected, right? There'll be this whole industry behind because behind there's always some there's companies that can sign fat contracts, and part of that is the American psychiatric community, because their status is raised if this is a problem, and if the government, if the schools can prescribe more drugs and get kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies like doctors do, just like they have these schools will have learning disabled programs, and but they get increased funding for every kid that's learning disabled. So any kid that has any problem, they're quick to call them learning disabled because they get more funding for it. So a kid's being tagged and being called, you're obviously you're learning disabled because you're not reading up to speed, or you're not listening, you're not paying attention, you're not doing well in a particular class. Same thing with other, so-called problems. If they have special classes designed to deal with them, more kids are going to be diagnosed with that problem if they get more funding for it.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, what you're describing is something that has been going on, and so it probably has a considerable amount of opposition among parents. They don't really like the teachers, the counselors, stuff being suggesting that their children be put on drugs and all that stuff. So what these school shootings do is they add another they add this potential, or what's being used as a way for these individuals to get a sort of a moral high ground. See, they can say, now, see, since you're, and then they can characterize not wanting to put your child on drug as some sort of neglect. So, because by doing that, your little junior could potentially be a mass shooter.
And do you want your kid to get shot by some kid whose mental issues weren't addressed?
See what's happening here. We got these these parents that want to actually trying to make these decisions not to have their children put on drugs, and they're endangering. It's like the same kind of arguments that they're put out for vaccines. It's like, now see these parents that don't want their children put on drugs they're endangering your child. So that's going to come into play as well. That it'll be all kind of positioned that way, where it's like, we'll see how vitally important this is as a matter of life and death, with all these school shootings that are just epidemic now, And
another thing is, of course, you have the drills or the lockdowns that traumatize the kids. And what is that conditioning them to? That's the school to prison project, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that too.
They come with dogs and tanks, and they scare the hell out of the kids. And some of the places they have unannounced drills, so people think it's real.
Oh yeah, and then they just go right on rampaging forward with it, and then by the way, that's just a drill there, buddy. You can go change your skivvies now. And
a drill that can occasionally go live if it suits an agenda.
Or it just goes live.
And I could just see them scaring the hell out of everybody, and walk away, and then the cops, as they drive away in their tanks, you're welcome.
Well, yeah.
And what that does is, and I've done a show on this with about this regarding, there's a reason why these drills go down is because they deploy some of this material, and under the 1033 program, some of this equipment has to be used, and pretty much they get grants to do this stuff. And these are programs. This is hardware, and this is staff that's sitting around idle, and so this is a chance for them to put on a show and be active. And if they can demonstrate that, they can apply for more grant money. So there's the same thing behind some of these no-knock raids.
Well, actually, that ties into or that's another adjunct to the fake news thing. I mean, I was trying to make the case last time about so you have this corporate body, this news 24-hour news cycle, that all these conglomerates that depend on a steady stream of news. And look at their incentive for being involved with fake news and these hoaxes, that we see out there with these shootings and stuff that are obviously contrived and fake. Now, that's another component of that is all this equipment and this federal funding that's going to these your local state police departments to actively engage in these drill hoax events. In order, like you're saying, so they can put on a show and say, "Hey, we really have a reason to have all this stuff." And it's, look at our schools, our war zones. We got to get out there in our armored personnel carriers and everything, and strut around and display the usefulness of all this crap that we got. And then they could that's yeah, and then they, like you're saying, that they could demonstrate that they need to use it, and they can get more federal funding. So there's another example of another sort of financial incentive.
Yeah,
And,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to add real quick that none of this is against the law, by the way. Because fake news is not, it's not against the law to fake the news.
Yeah, you had that. I had a discussion with John about that, but your previous discussion regarding the Smith-Mundt Act, and that only applied to the State Department.
Yeah, and what good is that? It's like, well,
and if you look at the issue of propaganda, that is so broad. It's in academia, it's in Hollywood, it's in advertising, and it doesn't really mean anything. There's a law against it. It could be an indication that they're ramping it up a bit, maybe the same way that that memo by the Attorney General William French Smith in '82 regarding the CIA and drugs and the Iran Contra. Perhaps someone wanted some legal protection. Maybe there's some significance there. I don't know. It could be an indication that they were stepping it up a bit, maybe. But yeah, fake news is kind of funny because I heard someone say that the fake news is kind of like the new conspiracy theory, I think. And the irony of that is the term conspiracy theory has its origins with the CIA back in 1967. So they went out. The CIA encouraged its field offices to promote in the news media the term conspiracy theory for those questioning the official narrative of the John F. Kennedy assassination. So ironically, is when we hear that term of abuse, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. That itself was a product of a conspiracy hatched by the CIA.
Yeah.
Confirmed.
Yeah, you could tap any kind of vein of rich irony you want surrounding all this stuff.
So there you go. That's
amazing.
They conspired to smear people who had the temerity to question the official narrative of events. But the idea of fake news, come on. I mean, quick little history tour through history. We have the sinking of the Maine, which was falsely reported as Spanish treachery, and
officially admitted to be.
Yeah. And it's William Randolph Hearst who promoted that, who supposedly said, "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war," to his artist regarding the drumming, beating the war drums for the Spanish-American War, which of course ushered in the era of American, overt American imperialism, at least overseas American imperialism. I think I mentioned off call. There's the much coveted Pulitzer Prize, the award that so many establishment journalists desire, and that's named after Joseph Pulitzer, who was the kingpin of yellow journalism, i.e., fake news, right? So I mean, it's since from the beginning. In 1917, a Senator Oscar Callaway exposed that J.P. Morgan had purchased the nation's 25 leading newspapers in an effort to control the news. This was to facilitate America's entry in the First World War. And of course, how much fake news was promoted during that time regarding the Lusitania, and there even was a fake cartoon that you can watch on YouTube that shows the Lusitania sinking, and it shows the German sub shooting 2 torpedoes into the side of the vessel to justify the report that there were 2 explosions. Of course, we know that the second explosion was the fact that the ship was packed from front to back with armaments.
Yeah, there's also a newsreel out there that was played that is obviously fake and staged of people getting the lifeboats. I'm pretty sure that's Lucid.
That's right.
Attributed to Lusitania. Yeah.
French newspapers actually showed pictures of Germans celebrating, and what it was Germans celebrating the declaration of war in 1914. And not coming out to rally. It was more a patriotic rally. And they said there were Germans celebrating the sinking of the Lusitania, which reminds you of remember September 11th when it was at CNN and Fox News ran file footage of Palestinians celebrating, and they reported it as live. Celebrating the attacks.
Could that be filed under fake news? I don't know.
And I remember make that point to people. I point that out. I say, wait a second, you don't accidentally put in file footage and say it's live. There's an intent to mislead. That's not a mistake. They said it was a mistake. No one says, "Oops, I put in this file footage."
Yeah, like you're going to go. Don't you have it by definition like a file? Like you have to go back into the file, right?
Yeah,
you're not going to have it like that sitting on your desk, and
you have to have it ready to go. You have to have it ready to go, right?
Yeah,
and I remember
get mixed up with
you can
something.
Still hear the Howard Stern show when 9/11 was going down. Of course, he's at the time. I think he was in New York on terrestrial radio, and he's seeing the Palestinians celebrate. and he's saying we should nuke those effers. We should.
Yeah,
So,
he's probably set up to say that too.
Yeah, so I mean that's how this gets out to this, and that's why you had Donald Trump. Remember saying he saw Arabs celebrating during the campaign, and I said I think you might have been confusing him with the dancing Israelis, but he probably was referring to the Palestinian, the file footage of the Palestinians.
There you go. People still refer to it to this day as if it was real. I mean, that says so much when you
just like with the Boston bombing, people think they saw, the Zarna brothers drop off the backpack, and even the governor of Massachusetts said he saw a videotape of them dropping the backpack. It turns out that was a dramatic recreation that the media ran.
There you go. I mean, that's. Why would they never show that? If they had that, I mean, what was the reasoning behind not showing that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's their kind of would be a very significant piece of evidence against those people. But no, I've never seen it. And there's like a lot of these events, and of course, there's always drills going on at the same time, just like with this OSU thing. There was a drill going on at the same time, typical of all this stuff. There's never any footage. Like, everywhere you go now, there's security cameras everywhere. But for some reason on these events, like the Nice truck attack or the Boston bombing or there was some alleged footage with the Boston bombing thing. I take that back. But airport bombings, airport shootings or whatever, like, where's all the security camera footage? How come you never see security camera footage?
Well, 9/11, right? There's no
9/11, the Pentagon, of course. Where's all 5 frames of footage of what you can't even tell what's going on, but there's an explosion. But there's cameras everywhere around the Pentagon and cameras in every mall you go into, cameras everywhere. But just no camera footage when you see this Orlando thing. Like, did they have security cameras inside? Take a look at that. Is there any mention of it? No. It's like. There's like a parallel universe, like where that took place in like 1914 or something, like where there's no cameras and there's no modern telecommunications or anything. Like, they didn't call 911. There wasn't any record of that or whatever. It's bizarre, is what I'm trying to say.
And also, both world wars in the 20th century, the freedom of the press was virtually suspended, and news was heavily censored in the interest of national security. World War I, you had the Creel Committee. Of course, I think that employed Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays. That was the Committee of Public Information. It was all propaganda, fake news. World War II, the Office of War Information, and OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. These were the wartime psychological warfare agencies charged with management, perception management, which is what? Propaganda, psychological warfare, wartime morale. Cold War, you had Operation Mockingbird that was exposed in the 70s. And you also had the CIA front, the Congress of Cultural Freedom, which got into art, journalism, any number of publications. Who knows? I mean, I think people have exposed things like Ms. Magazine and National Review as being CIA publications. So does that constitute fake news? I would say it does, to the extent that you're manipulating public opinion through control or manipulation of information. And that was done broadly. That's been done, I think, for at least a century. And then, of course, the off-cited CNN faking the Scud missile attacks during the Gulf War, right? The guys. Right.
I want to go into something here that I went on the last call. I think it's important too because I think it goes. I think it goes along with sound thinking, critical analysis. I mean, it's like kind of looking at maybe a bigger picture view of this. Is that okay? Let's take a minute to examine our premise. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about this. I guess it's social construct. I guess I could just trying to figure out a way to characterize it. This organization, this thing that's known as the mainstream news media. Like what exactly is it? How do we find it? Well, we know it's some sort of affiliated group of individuals that are identified as the mainstream press, right? And they all, whether you're talking about ABC or NBC or CNN or whatever, they they have a very similar, a lot of similarities between all those. They're not. It wouldn't. I don't think it'd be right to characterize them as totally independent, separate organizations, right? I mean, they have too many parallel characteristics among all of them. I mean, they report on the same things at the same time. They all have like a sort of this unified front about them on the surface. But whatever the case, it's like you have to. It's like what I go into when I'm discussing evolution theory or Darwinism. It's like it's all you have this. You have this unfounded premise where it's like, well, you have the so-called scientific establishment, where all these claims of we came from monkeys and we evolved from the slime and then the Big Bang and everything is predicated upon this. This comes out of the Western naturalistic, materialistic, reductionist scientism philosophy of the belief, the way but see, this is all characteristic of one definable sort of organizational structure known as Western science, right? Mm-hmm. Through academia and all that, the academic institutions and so on. So you could kind of lump them all into one pile with good reason. But you have to establish, okay, where's the evidence that establishes them as some sort of uncorrupted source of truth, or what would be the representative of this thing called the scientific method? What establishes them and makes them distinctly more credible or legitimate over, say, like the scientific body that is representative of scientists that comprise scientific endeavor within the Mormon Church, because there is such a thing. Mm-hmm. So why are they more credible than this organization or another organization that's engaged in so-called science? Like what? In other words, what proof is there that this thing called Darwin's theory of evolution is not some sort of a pseudoscience that has been grown within this organizational culture, and that it's sort of become this dogma to where if you oppose it, you are and there's all kinds of evidence for this is what happens. You're ostracized, you're dismissed from the club if you don't toe the line of the established cultist dogma of evolution. Now, and my question would be, okay, what proof do you have that is not the case, or that particular organization is immune from that sort of thing? Whether it's whether it's evolution or any other thing that would be indicative of corrupted science. Now, where's your evidence that this particular organizational culture is immune from that thing? That's the main thrust of the point. It's not to go into evolution theory per se, but it's to point that out. It's like, where is your evidence that this organization is somehow only concerned with the pure, unsullied pursuit of knowledge and truth and science? Where's the evidence? There is none, and nobody can give you any either. So
I would say there's evidence pointing in the other direction.
Oh, there's plenty of evidence pointing in the other direction. Yeah. And
there's a book called The Freemasonic Origins of Science. I think it goes to the Royal Society itself, its origins and its agenda.
Or you can point out just what people of inside the so-called peer review process have stated about the peer review process itself. They said the very peer review process is unscientific, and most of the papers, according to the guy, the head of the Lancet Journal, said that half the papers that have been published in the Lancet Journal are false. So what does that tell you? It's like, well, you're not looking at a legitimate construct, or that's what it tells me.
Yeah, I mean, just a cursory reading of the history of vaccines makes one question the entire legitimacy of the medical community, because if you just read the history of vaccines and their so-called effectiveness and their problems, there's always been a gross exaggeration of their effectiveness and an irresponsible underestimation, or at least consideration of their cost or their negative effects.
Or you can look at the peer-reviewed study that came out. Was it Barbara Starr, something that she's it publishes in peer-reviewed journals about a paper that concluded that the medical establishment is the third leading cause of death in the United States. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was another analysis done of that analysis where it pointed out, because of underreporting on medical malpractice and everything else, that it is probably by far and away the number one cause of death, if you take into consideration the gross underreporting when it comes to those sort of statistics.
Yeah.
With pharmaceutical related deaths and everything else are grossly underreported. So it's most likely and probably demonstrably provable that that's a redundant, but anyway, that it's the leading cause of death. But
they have the white coats, they have the medical schools, and they have all the medical. And gets back into propaganda is, if you just go back and watch television, whether it's ER or Medical Center or Marcus Welby, MD, all this propaganda for the medical establishment.
Right, it's all propped up by propaganda and public relations efforts and everything else. And,
I mean, the closest that came to it would be that movie. Have you ever seen the movie The Hospital with George C. Scott? And about
no.
It's made back in the early 70s. It's a very good movie. It's a very good movie. It's a lot of good dialogue to it. I think it's the same guy who directed the Parallax View, if I forgot that right.
Oh, okay.
But it's part of these. You had this genre of films in the 70s that started to, actually, very interesting. They started to be very critical of the establishment for a while. Then Hollywood quickly changed. But it's about just sort of the idiocy and inefficiency and abuse of modern medicine in a hospital in an urban. I think it's in New York City. Again, the point is that they've had, for the most part, it gets back to propaganda. Is that most people's idea of medicine, is what like movie like ER, which or television show ER would be considered like a gritty, realistic show about medicine, but it's really. It's promoting the mainstream medicine. Same thing. All the shows going back in Dr. Kildare, I think back in the 60s.
Yeah.
To Medical Center with Chad Everett in the 70s. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. And then the 80s, we've had just a slew of medical shows. There's medical dramas, right? And same thing with police dramas, and same thing with shows about the military. Even shows that kind of trying to pass themselves off as gritty police shows like NYPD Blue or Hill Street Blues. At the end, it's still there's still a lot of propaganda in that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you point all this out because that's how people's faith and trust in these systems are maintained through fiction and drama. Now, they don't go looking at peer-reviewed papers like the ones I pointed out here, or the actual statistics on any of this stuff. They go into the doctor with the utmost trust and faith, and you got to ask yourself why. It's like, well, because they've been conditioned. Their relationship with this doctor has been already preconditioned through their exposure to all this these depictions of it in these fictional representations in the TV and in the movies and all that.
Yeah, and this what was that movie with Matt Damon a few years ago about the? That's not Outbreak. What was it called again? Pandemic, I think, or
never saw that. I don't
it was
know.
a movie about some strain of like a pig flu or something that ends up killing like 5 million Americans. It's a global pandemic, and within that movie, the CDC is portrayed as being very heroic, even dying to find a cure. They go out and find this cure, and of course the solution is one vaccine to stop it.
Oh yeah,
and it's successful. But the movie's about that. There's no movie made about the CDC covering up the link of autism and MMR, and Bill Thompson's revelations about the CDC covering up the link autism and the media's complicity in this, and how the media's the media's white propaganda, the mainstream media, and is fake news white propaganda? Is not reporting something fake news?
Yeah, there's so many different variables and aspects to what
it's a sin of omission, right? It's a sin of omission.
Yeah, causing
millions of kids perhaps to get autism because they don't report the fact this MMR vaccine was problematic, and it increases the rate of autism because what it does to the immune system and the reaction kids have to it.
Yeah, you have all this to look at, and the reason why I went into bringing that up, and I appreciate here that you're pointing out that we're propagandized so heavily through these films. Same thing with the media. Same thing. The thing that props up this idea that the media only exists out there to give the masses the truth, or at least that's what they're attempting to do, or whatever. And you see this all depicted in films and stuff like too. Like you'll see all these scenarios, and may even kind of be delving into something of a conspiratorial nature and stuff like that. And then it's like, what is the hero trying to do? He's trying to get this piece of footage or these documents or something like that, and he's like, if I could just get this to the press, then they'll expose it, and then this bad, corrupt organization will be exposed to the world, and then all will be set at balance, and everything will be right in the world from that point forward. You see that time and time and time again in film. It's like, I just got to get this to the press. I just got to get this to the media.
Well, all the President's Men. I want to talk about propaganda. All the President's Men, the movie.
What was that dealing with? Was that
Watergate?
Watergate, yeah.
Robert Redford playing Bob Woodward. Isn't that great? Bob Woodward.
Yeah, and that's what I think that's what Watergate set about to do. I think the whole thing was a psychological operation, and I think what it was designed to do was to as ongoing conditioning to instill faith in the average person of the media.
Well, to this day, people still cite Watergate as the high watermark for investigative journalism in the United States, when you just scratch the surface and the official narrative doesn't make any sense, or at least it's a limited hangout, because CIA was all over that thing. All the principal figures who brought about Nixon's downfall were CIA. It was a coup against Nixon for multiple reasons, perhaps. But again, when you're dealing in the clandestine world, you're dealing with a bunch of liars and psychopaths. You're in a hall of mirrors, so you can never really be sure. But it definitely wasn't because of a break-in at the Democratic National Headquarters, and that was a setup. That obviously was a setup.
Yeah, and I've kind of got a theory that presidents, they don't actually run things, but they can lend themselves to be unwitting dupes and a lot of this stuff. Yeah. So they get in there and they get gaslighted by the CIA and everything else, and they probably get continually jacked.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Praetorians show up and tell them who's really in charge, and if they don't, play by the rules, or they're troublesome for some reason, they can be taken out, and they don't have to be assassinated anymore. Really, I think they can, like Carter or something, or like a Nixon. They can make sort of a coup and make it seem like an election or a scandal, because every politician is going to have some skeletons of closet that can be exposed and help to bring them down if the powers that be want that to be the case.
Yeah. So. And then on the other hand, I think too they may simply be people that are groomed for that position, from an early age, and they understand the game way before their name is even a household fixture in the public.
Yeah.
And so that by the time they get in that position, like Obama, it was admittedly, it came out that he was groomed by a Shakespearean actor for a couple of years to give him his diction and his mannerisms and everything.
Yeah, and you pointed out Obama is that this is a guy whose documentation, papers aren't even in order, and that's conspiracy theory, right? But
it sounds like conspiracy theory. Yeah.
But if you do the research, you realize that there is a problem with the Social Security number. There is a problem with his birth certificate. There is no one at Columbia remembers him.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But where did they? Yeah, so he's probably groomed from a very young age to be this this persona, which is Obama. You could put the registered trademark behind his name as sort of this brand. It's not even his real name is Barry Soetoro, right? Is that you ever look into that?
Yeah,
I've heard that, but I never looked into it. But it doesn't surprise me that it's like not even his real name, but it's like this. Obama is a brand, and it's all. And I think that his persona is a carefully crafted persona. I think this is something is manufactured that is, and he has like all these kind of interesting affiliations with like what Frank Marshall Davis is maybe his real dad, could possibly be, or whatever. But I think whatever the case, whether that's true or not, you're going to have this. If they're going to be a Democrat and represent the D side or whatever you want to call it, they're going to have this pedigree and this backdrop and this legend behind them that's going to trigger the right.
Yeah, of course. He had the he was good friends with Billy Ayers, who was probably some sort of controlled opposition. He somehow got off guilty as hell, free as a bird. His remark after he got off, despite his years of radicalism with the Weather Underground terrorism. It's good. I read a recent article about how Billy Ayers actually wrote an article how you can acquire fake social security numbers. So that's what he did when he was on the lam, apparently.
Oh, really? So
So these social security numbers pop up. Apparently, it is issued in Connecticut for Obama. Obama never lived in Connecticut; it was in Hawaii. And
he probably has 20 or 30 different social security numbers.
Well, that's another thing is if the powers that be, the intelligence agencies that manage these things, they have all types of sheep dipping programs, and the paperwork, the documentation, social security numbers, they can be manipulated and cool. And I think another thing is the fact that it apparently is so done so haphazardly is another psyop, right? It's like this birth certificate. Why did the White House release this obviously false? When they had the layered birth certificate, it was obviously faked because the controversy. They love the controversy itself is part of the psyop.
Yeah, it's part of the psyop, and it's like, of course, if I saw that and I said, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. When I looked at the PDF file and the layering and all that, it's just retarded. But it's like, no, they put it out on purpose like that, and they wanted to be so overtly contrived and stuff that for people to latch onto it. But it's like, but I knew. I mean, being a graphic artist myself and everything, I said, I could have sat down and did a way better job than that. It's like this is obviously intentfully hacked together purposely. But
the point that I think Jay Darius made this point regarding Hollywood. The media, news, academia it's all one complex. I mean, it's perception management. And most people understand the news events ultimately through the movies and how they're dramatized, particularly the big events. Whether it's Zero Dark 30 or Argo, right? Or their idea of World War II. It's whether it's Schindler's List or Battle of the Bulge or The Longest Day. These things. This is their ideas of the war. They're not going to bother to read the details, the history, the controversies, and the problems with the official narratives that we've been given to understand these events. Because obviously the powers that be want us to have a certain interpretation of these events, want to accept certain narratives of these events, so we can be manipulated further in the next stage of what their plans are.
Oh yeah, I tend to think now. I mean, as kind of my thoughts have developed over the years, kind of looking into different stuff. It's like that. I've said this before. I think this is kind of the underpinning to like a lot of the positions that I take is that we are like a domesticated product. Like we live like this thing called civilization or whatever you want to call it. And if you can even look up the definition of civilization, it backs this up. It's the domestication of humans and animals. So like who are the domesticated humans? So I mean, if you're looking at that Wikipedia entry, I guess that what they're inferring or implying is like they want you to invoke Aztec cultures or Egyptians where they had slaves building the monuments and all that, and that's what they're talking about domesticated. It's like, no, you're talking about you, the reader. If you're in civilization, you're a domesticated product. And so since you're a domesticated product, like you're being farmed in a lot of respects, it's like, do you need to know the truth about anything? No. You need to be fed a certain diet. and that includes your mental diet. And what is the purpose? Well, since you're a domesticated product, you need to be shaped and molded for your intended consumption as a product, which is your labor, which is your energy that gets extracted from you by way of the contrived money construct into the people who are at the top of the chain. And it's like, and I even, with that said, I don't like to even position myself as like some sort of, or the people in general as like this sort of dialectic between us and the elites. You know what I'm saying? Because I think there's a lot of indicators too that even these people at the higher up management, they are victims themselves of this system. And so it's sort of, when you talk about the system, it's almost like, it's almost kind of like an entity into itself, where it's like everybody is sort of playing this role in it, but at the same time they're all victims of it, enslaved to it. And so it's very there's that aspect to it. But of course, I think there's people that are more consciously aware of how it really operates and what's really going on. And I think it is sort of a mistake to take and create another dialectic where we're saying, oh, these are the enemies and these are the people that are in control. Because I think in a lot of respects there doesn't appear to be anybody really in control. Not that I'm saying that there's not somewhere, but calling the shots, somewhere higher up. But how do you identify these people, and how do you really parse that or pick it apart? I don't know.
Yeah, who is they?
Yeah, who is they? That's a perennial question, right? It's like,
well, I think what you're saying, there definitely is a hierarchy there, and I think if you get, when they established the schools, they established the academies for the elite, the professional schools for the managers, and then the typical, the average schools for the rest of the people, the workers. So that they believe that there's levels of education that you get that serve whatever your function is, and I guess the higher you up, or the higher degree you are, perhaps put it in Freemasonic terms, you may get a more understanding of the big picture of of the big plan, if there is one plan. It's probably what it is, just a conglomerate of corporate interests, ultimately that are owned by a handful of. They've been identified. I think it was the book, The 6,000, about the 6,000 elites that run the world, and there's the power elite, but written by C. Wright Mills and all that. But there's probably through interlocking directorates, through things like Bilderberg or Davos and whatever soirees they held, or Bohemian Grove and all that stuff. Which they get together, they meet and they strategize. And I think it was Daniel Estlin who called it an aristocracy of purpose. It's not one big emperor sitting on a throne somewhere, commanding. It's a committee. It's like The Godfather. They get together. The 5 families meet and they strategize. They may fight every once in a while. They may be a more enlightened member of this criminal cabal that wants to do things a little differently. And so you have these battles that fought it out. But I'm not privy. I don't go to their eyes. I'm not attending the eyes wide shut balls parties.
No, it's like
so you're left to guess and speculate, and the best with the best information you have.
Yeah, it's kind of this affiliation of kind of like-minded individuals that have sort of a common they're identified a certain way within the system, and then they have this commonality among them, and then
they go to the same country clubs, they attend the same schools, they intermarry. There's the social. We used to have the social register. It's gonna
the who's who list.
Yeah, the who's who in America, and they're gonna meet. They're gonna hang out together, and they used to have the bloodlines. You still do. We're all family, and it's probably the people that own stock in the central banks of the world who are behind it, who created these things, and through that instrument, through those financial instruments, they can pretty much monopolize, or at least to a large extent control the politics and economics of each and every country in the world, which how it's been designed. And if you study central banking and how it's done, and some of the intrigues and the wars and the roles that finance had to do with it, and money and the control of resources. And that's the big thing is the control of resources and land, and how they create this money system in a way that they have control of the money system. So gradually they can accumulate and control more and more of the world's natural resources to monopolize, and that's definitely been a trend, since the 20th beginning of the 20th century. That's what the wars are all about. It's always some sort of. If you stand back, it looks like all the wars have been some sort of like consolidation scheme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with that, with consolidation and
pumping and dumping, right? You can markets, you can get areas. I think you made that point regarding the Dust Bowl and agriculture as a way to get the land developed. So then you can pump and dump and buy the land for free. That maybe is behind weather warfare. You can, through weather warfare, you can go short on property or go long when you want, or you can speculate on commodities in a way that enable you to monopolize it. Mm-hmm. The drug trade is a big part of that. The drug trade is a big part of, I think, of corporate consolidation. I was just reading recently an article by Catherine Austin Fitts that said that it was drug laundering money that financed the RJR Nabisco merger in the 1980s.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the corporate consolidation that we see today, I think, can be traced to the drug trade, because this money is being laundered through corporations, and through that cash flow, they can get they have an advantage over smaller companies, local competition. And also enables them to get better, allows them to borrow money cheaper, which enables them to grow. I think she made the point that if you're in the business of shipping in bananas, if you're shipping in just bananas, and your competitor is shipping in bananas and cocaine, and has the protection of the intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies, who do you think is going to win out in that competition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with business, and and then we're talking about the media and fake media. It too is a business, no doubt, and so I would say, like, on the question of fake news, I mean, we really got to examine this whole premise that it's based on. I mean, the idea is. I think the question needs to be asked is, like, is there real news anyway? Is there real news as it is now? What is real news? Because that's what the implications of that the ones that are pointing out fake news are the ones that are offering up real news, quote unquote, real news. But then again, it's like, okay, we supposedly live in this scientific age where everybody wants to appeal to facts and evidence. It's like, okay, where's your evidence that the news media is what it is commonly accepted? The average person, what their idea of what the news media is. Where's the evidence that is what it presents itself to be?
Yeah. Why is your fallback position or your default position is when you're watching the news is you're getting some portrayal of reality, some honest attempt to project to you, to send you reality. When you're watching on a screen, in other words, when you're watching a movie, you suspend that, and you say, okay, I'm watching a movie. This is a drama. Why when you're watching news, shouldn't you have that same, presumption that you're watching someone's portrayal of an event or someone's production? And so, if it is someone's production and you're watching through a medium, why do you assume that what you're seeing has anything to do with reality?
Yeah, you have to go into it with certain unfounded assumptions that, like, CNN News is primarily their reason for existence is to give me a product that is it meets these certain criteria. It's grounded in truth somehow. It's grounded in reality somehow, and that's all based on this presumption that that's what they exist for. And it brings another question to mind too. It's like, where can you find their? Maybe it exists somewhere. I don't know, like a CNN or Fox or ABC. Where is their mission statement as far as what their public duty to the as far as where that is expressly stated somewhere?
Yeah, some sort of corporate charter or something.
Right.
There used to be corporations that have in their charter they'd have some claim they would exist for a limited period of time. They had some sort of public mission.
Yeah, they have
building a road or something, right?
Yeah, they have a mission statement for their existence. Like, here is our stated goal, or here's what we've been incorporated to do. And then, okay, now where is this in regards to the media? Does this exist? And if it does exist, what bearing would that have on reality? You know, I mean, is there some sort of legal repercussions that can be demonstrated as being in existence where you can show that? And I asked the question, like, where can you find any point in history where CBS, NBC, ABC, when has their license ever been revoked or denied them upon renewal? The time for can you show any time in history when that has ever happened?
No, it hasn't. And
so they then by inference are these organizations that have consistently throughout the years without fail been there primarily to deliver the American people the uncorrupted truth.
Right, and listen, if you just do a history of the people that provide us the news and their background, with Sarnoff or Paley, they all came from intelligence, OSS and Office of War Information, the Psychological Warfare Office. You know, this was TV news. So its pedigree ties back to the intelligence agencies, who do work for the corporations. And I think you've said it before. Is Fox News is, I think, FCC is regulated as entertainment.
Right. Yes, it's classified as entertainment, and it's under the category of entertainment. But
I'm not distinguishing from CNN or MSNBC or CBS or ABC.
No, right.
I mean, it's all the same. And if you look at it from a corporate standpoint, and its fiduciary responsibilities to its stockholders is to make a profit. It isn't to provide you news. I mean, that's and so. If anything, if you look at, if you watch a public affairs, if you watch a show on Fox News and the commercials, it's either, a military industrial contracting company like McDonnell, like a Lockheed Martin, or it's a pharmaceutical company. Do you think they're going to have news that's going to cast a negative light on the pharmaceutical industry? Or they're not going to have news that's going to be promoting war because that's good for the stocks of Lockheed Martin? Or whatever pharmaceutical companies are out there, they're going to produce news stories that serve the interest of their sponsors, and that's just from a business standpoint. I'm not even talking about the more esoteric agenda that might be behind these corporations. You might be why CBS has an eye as a symbol.
Yeah,
it's cultural programming. So.
I'm sure you've probably gotten this. Haven't you gotten somebody, criticizing you that, just because you have a podcast and you're putting out material? Mm-hmm. Have you ever had anybody accuse you of just being in it for the money?
Not direct, of being a shill.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't yet. At least maybe I forgot it if I did. I don't read all the comments sometimes. I try to go through there, but often I get more accused of something like I'm not tough enough. Although I've done shows that are very critical of the Jewish community, particularly Jewish groups. Sometimes I'm not anti-Jewish enough,
yeah,
or I'm not anti-Catholic enough. I'm not. Everyone has their idea. It's almost, when you look into these things, it's almost like that. I read an article today about basically about the unified theory of everything about politics. It's a very good article on the Oons report. I think it's called. Is it Ron Oons? I think he does it. But it's the whole story of the blind men touching the elephant. And the idea that they identify they're blind and they say they touch it and they can't see, but from what they're touching, they try to describe what they're touching, but only touching one part of it. And so a lot of it, when you look into this stuff, is people only have one perspective on it. And so their interpretation of the big picture is based on their perspective. and it's very hard to stand back and get the full picture, because I don't know if that's even humanly possible. Because I mean, as mortal human beings, we're only can have it one spot at one time and have a 360 degree perception of what's going on around us. But you realize our perception is only partial. What's really going on. We're never going to have a full picture. So it's difficult to say. But your point is often as people do, they accuse you of having some sort of agenda as opposed to just trying to figure out what's going on, whether it's money or whatever, ideological, whatever.
Yeah, it's a common. Well, it's common. I see it out there too, levied at other people. It's like if they have any kind of a blog, or if they're trying to maybe make a little bit of money to kind of maintain their operation or whatever, they get accused of, you're in it for the money. Yeah,
I think, when you get, mine's still relatively still small, so I don't get that. But say if I were to be marketing, have to market myself more, I think Jay's run into that problem. It's his living. And so then when he crosses somebody or they have some sort of disagreement, they're likely to call him a shill.
Yeah,
because it's his job now. So, without any evidence, they'll call names and say you're a shill, this sort of stuff, as opposed to just being mistaken or you having disagreement with him over some point.
Yeah, it's a common thing that gets leveled at people, like, you're just. Yeah, I have it leveled at me on a video comment on a video, and it's like I just pointed out to him. I said, "Hey, man, I don't even have monetization on any of my videos. Did you even happen to notice that?" It's like, but no. I said it doesn't prevent people from like it's kind of like this default or this kind of like reflexive thing where it's like, "Oh, you're in it for the money," or so it's instead of dealing with what you're bringing up, they could just dismiss you by just some baseless accusation like that, which is so that sentiment is out there. Okay, be wary of the people out there that are just hucksters that are just kind of in it for the money or whatever. So it's just like that's commonly accepted as something, but like so you have that. What I'm pointing out is that sentiment is out there and it exists, but at the same time you have this so-called mainstream news media, which is quite obviously and glaringly and blatantly profit-driven. I mean, they go to commercial for just about anything. Like you've seen it where they'll show you like news talking heads, and then they'll go to a commercial Raytheon for freak's sake. Well, after they just got through talking about how we need to go to war, and they'll go to a commercial. I mean, just blatant. Conflict of interest right there. I mean, just in your face. But at the same time, within this culture, people still have this kind of default assumption that they're there to tell you the truth somehow.
It's really like Face the Nation, brought to you by Lockheed Martin. Yeah. Okay. Do you ever see a problem here?
Lockheed freaking Martin. I mean, come on. It's like. And
same thing with the think tanks too. If you talk about think tanks, and there's all part of the propaganda that they provide ideas, as if people who work at these think tanks are free to just come up with ideas. No, they have sponsors, they have donors, they have corporate sponsors, and if you don't do the bidding of the people that write the checks, you're not going to be employed there too long as an intellectual or a thinker.
Yeah, so any reasonable person that's aware of that potentiality for money concerns to corrupt a message or something like that the last place that they should go for information would be the mainstream press.
Yeah, and with that money, when you're a Rockefeller, you're a Rothschild, or a Harriman, these families, and I think ultimately it comes back to families. I think controlling these things, a handful of elite families. You have enough. Since you're so wealthy, wealth begets power, and power begets wealth. That's how the system works. You leverage your wealth politically. You buy out the universities. You endow the universities. You create entire disciplines like sociology. You change the course of economic studies, like at University of Chicago. You can, and with all that money, since you control the banks, money no longer means anything to you because that's just a plaything to you. It's a tool you use, and you actually determine the creation of money and who gets that money because you control the banks, and that's how the central banks are designed. And what do you think? $27 trillion in private, not secret, but they're in currency swaps that the Federal Reserve pulled off back in 2009. $27 trillion. And
27 trillion, that's
yeah,
what they said.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, it's a huge massive bank heist. But anyway, huge transfer of wealth, and with that, you can consolidate and control economies and buy up all the corporations. But what I'm saying is, when you have that much control over the world's currencies, you can control the resources. With those resources, you can buy up universities, buy up networks, and like I mentioned earlier about J.P. Morgan buying up 25 newspapers. Once you buy up 25 major newspapers, all the other newspapers rely on those newspapers for their news feed. You control the news, and you do that. And you don't have to go to every reporter on your staff and go, "You work for me now, report the news." No, you just put it in the right editor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's fairly simple when you have the money. I mean, it's
yeah, and some of this, you're pointing out here is just glaringly obvious. It's not even debatable. It's not an issue of debate. It's right there in your face. Like I said, you can watch the dang presentation, the news presentation, and they'll go to a damn commercial for some pharmaceutical company, or like I said, Raytheon or something. It's like, and so as a consumer, you're looking at that and you're telling me that has no influence or bearing on the material that they're presenting to you. It obviously does. And then that obviously is going to influence what they're telling you. So it's so glaringly obvious. My question is, why do people I know there's like a high percentage, like trust in the media is like at an all-time low. I understand that, but on the other hand, it's almost like the default position is still in place, like where people think in general, I can go and turn on Fox News or CNN and NBC and get something relevant. Mm-hmm. That is still the commonly held notion among the populace at large, I think. But it's like, again, I'm asking the question. It's like, where is your science-minded people, evidence-minded people? Where's your evidence that there is that we should have any trust or faith in the news media whatsoever? No, I understand that. Like, you could turn on your local news and they'll tell you, "Oh, there's going to be a shopping mall, and that's why they're clearing out the ground." Are they lying to you? No, probably not. This probably really is going to be a shopping mall there. I don't doubt it. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff like that that's kind of mundane stuff.
There's a traffic jam on 95.
Yeah, that stuff. It's going to rain tomorrow. Well, I don't know. That's another story. That may be totally inaccurate. But for the most part, I mean, there's that. And I think that's sort of, those sort of things there are done as, public relations a program or something like that. So the news media can inform you, "Oh, the fair's coming to town. Oh, good. I take the kids down there." And it's like, I thanks to my local Fox News affiliate, I know about the fair coming to town. Mm-hmm. So so with all of this said, there are tangible, real world benefits to tuning in to so-called news.
Oh yeah, and the same thing. It's the fair is coming to town. That's true. It's my baseball team won last night. That's true. There's a mass shooting at the university. Okay, now we're getting into a dicier area there, because now there's a social engineering scheme to that story. It might not be with telling you that there's a traffic jam somewhere. That's admitted. I mean, the news report, Fox News ran repeatedly in the early days after 9/11. Remember that the alerts, the color-coded alerts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it was admitted that the Department of Homeland Security issued those for political reasons in the run-up to the 2004 election.
Oh yeah,
Tom Ridge admitted that these things were admitted to, these things are done to psych out the public. And that's just a mild example, of that. But that's manipulation. That's to me, if that's a violation of the public trust and all that stuff. Now you can just say they were just Fox News just reporting what DHS said. But if you read Fletcher Prouty's book about how the intelligence agencies would infiltrate and pepper the various other agencies and also corporations and also news media with agents, that it's obvious now at this late stage of the game is the networks are all pretty much totally infiltrated, or if not working, not working directly with the various intelligence agencies for the purposes of propaganda or some sort of psychological warfare or perception management. That's been admitted. We had that recent story. I think this is the WikiLeaks stuff with that company Bell Pottinger, a $540 million contract to produce DVDs, fake news.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
you have your video news releases out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked about those multiple times where it's a commercial that's produced by a corporation, and then the news media takes it and they run it on their regular news program. And the way it's set up, it's all set up to appear as if it's a regular part of the news reportage and all that, but it absolutely isn't. It's just you're looking at an advertisement that has the appearance of news. So, I mean, that alone should require everybody that consumes news to take every single thing that they're seeing with a big grain of salt. It's like you have to be seriously skeptical of everything you see on the news. Mm-hmm. I would even go as far as being skeptical enough to say, "Oh, is there really a shopping mall going in, or is that they really tell me it's right?" I don't know. It's like I don't know anymore. I just don't trust anything they say. But yeah, probably there's going to be a grocery store or whatever. I guess the point I'm trying to make with saying stuff like that is that it's just like the government too, where I can rail against the government, talk about the law is illegitimate and all that, and at the same time, they arrest some people for running a meth lab over here that was creating hazard, which is true, and it's a discernible, recognizable benefit that courtesy of my local police and government.
Yeah, so if your car happens to break down, it doesn't say that police officer might pull up behind you and pull out some flares and help you out. Yeah.
No, right, yeah.
Or
and it's like so you get accused of like, hating cops or hating anybody in government. It's like, no, it's not the point. It's just that the idea that in the aggregate, is there less injustice and less crime? I think a case can be made that the opposite is true. That in the aggregate, the so-called government facilitates criminal activity that can't exist without it. You can't have a system. The way the system is set up and exists, it facilitates such incredible, atrocious circumstances like child trafficking networks and absurd, ridiculous, crazy, criminally insane the things that are part of reality now. It's like but without government, they couldn't exist. So, so that it just brings into question. It's like, does this really, all this stuff, does it exist really for the benefit of the civilized world, or is it to the detriment of humanity as a whole? I think that's another question that comes up in all of this. It's like, we take for granted that that all these institutions are there for the sole intent of and concern of facilitating the betterment of human habitation on the earth. But it's like, but when you take into consideration all this other stuff, like the medical establishment, we just got to pointing out, the leading cause of death or anything, it's like, maybe the exact opposite is true, which is a conclusion I'm coming to. It's like, look at the society, look at the man. I mean, it's like, it's so distressing to hear about these these child trafficking networks. But I mean, there's enough indicators to bear out that this is a real thing, and this is a real thing in our culture and society.
You had a guest on your Hoaxbuster call that pointed out that we're taken and we're justifiably outraged and shocked by child trafficking, and also the fact that pedophilia rings operating with these people that are so close to power. People like Podesta allegedly would have been was chief of staff during the Clinton administration, and chief of staff would have been chief of staff in a Hillary Clinton administration, being involved in these things, and that is disturbing. But we live in a world that aborts 50 million babies a year.
Right, and then they had something that came out not too long ago, how they were like not only butchering children in the womb, but then selling the parts, which is like that adds another whole layer of
that was Planned Parenthood, and the scandal there turned out, at least the legal trouble turned out that it was a Project Veritas used fake IDs or something to film these people to get into the event.
So that's what they got uptight about, the fake IDs. Yeah.
That's what the government cracked down on, the fact that they were used fake IDs. Of course, if you use fake IDs, you might be a terrorist.
Exactly, yeah. So the people that were exposing it are the bad people. Yeah. See, that's how twisted the whole the whole establishment is.
And you don't sell body parts. What happens is you give a donation for them.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. See, I misspoke. I'm a terrorist just by saying that.
So they're selling body parts to these things. They undercover.
Selling body parts. Yeah, selling body part, baby parts, and unabashedly enough to be on to discuss this out in public. They were in a public venue at a restaurant, eating no less, talking about this totally detestable activity that they're engaged in, and it's like, well, no. I mean, as grotesque as that is, that can't exist anywhere other than so-called civilization. When you think about it, I mean, you could talk. I mean, I talk about like, I ponder on like what would have been like, 300 years ago when it was nothing but the Indians habitated this continent. Like, what was there big traffic in child abuse and stuff? No, it couldn't have existed, right? Because that would be readily the ill effects and the fallout would be readily noticeable in a kind of confined tribal situation where people would, that instinctively banish anybody that's engaged in that, right? Which is what they did, naturally. It's a more natural system, and not to romanticize that. I think that's the ultimate ideal or anything like that. But you have to draw these comparisons. Now that's typically we'll hold that up as like those people being savages, right, or barbaric.
Yeah, because they're primitive. But then again,
primitive
to develop the Maxim gun and shells and like World War One, that's not barbaric.
No, that's not barbaric. And then we can have a systematized whole separate subculture within our culture that's geared solely around the destruction of other countries, to go in and occupy and destroy their infrastructure and destroy their culture and just decimate them. Mm-hmm. And that's normal in our culture. And we have we talk about the abortion industry. That's totally normal and acceptable. And abortion is totally normal. And we have teenagers getting abortions, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. In schools, that's normal. Pedophilia is so common, it might as well be considered normal. Just do the search. What I was talking about, youth counselor charged with sex abuse, and you get endless and you say, oh, well, see, they're getting punished, Chris. It's like, oh, no, look at the sentences they get. It's like nothing.
Well, look how they've sexualized children. I mentioned the sexual education, which is overt, under the excuse of age education, which I mentioned earlier, which is overt. And that shows how the malfeasance involved in such things, how they're using fear to break down people's resistance to these things. But just the overall culture itself, how people just, how many people just, accept the entertainment fare that's offered these days and let it be piped into their homes and let their kids watch this stuff, the music and stuff. All this stuff is sexualizing children, which is leading towards this pedophilic culture.
Yeah, and it's getting more and more normalized and more accepted, and it by other measures, stuff we pointed out, it'll be here. It's taking us through the process right now, and so yeah. My question is like, what good is this thing called civilization? I mean, it's almost like you can make a case there's more human suffering and indignities and injustice and barbaric, savage activity that takes place within this construct called civilization that there could possibly exist in so-called primitive societies, because you could not sustain killing your own children and systematic child abuse and everything within a so-called primitive culture.
Yeah, and this we're not necessarily talking about technological plateaus being met or achievements, because I think it's almost like a developmental societal thing. Because if you take it occurs in empires, right? It doesn't occur in pastoral communities or something, because again, you couldn't sustain it. What reportedly occurred like in the Aztec Empire, with the elite doing these things to justify their rule. It seems to be we're experiencing a similar thing in the West.
Yeah, and that would be characterized as a sort of agrarian civilization, more advanced, so-called quote unquote. But then you see the systematized barbaric practices of human sacrifice and everything that they engaged in. And well, I mean, I bring that up a lot. It's like what. Defining these terms, like define tyranny, define authoritarian, define barbaric, define savagery, define, it's like, if you go into the definitions, it's like, well, we have all of that stuff engaged in openly, but called different things in our system right now.
Yeah, the firebombing of Dresden or Tokyo in 1945. And, I mentioned the trench warfare and, mowing people down in the thousands as they charged your fortified positions, these things. And that's not barbaric. I mean,
yeah, that's not barbaric. That's honorable. And that falls under the category of heroics, heroism and the noble pursuit of, our greatest generation in defense of our great nation. And they're held up as like heroes, and so we have these observances every year to commemorate their heroics and everything. That's not barbaric.
Yeah, so that's the function of museums and memorials,
right? And then we have memorials to them, and then I was pointing out the sort of absurdity of some of the positions, some right-wing positions where they want to define socialism. So I guess the Civilian Conservation Corps pre-World War II would be considered socialist, and we don't need that. That's bad. But you can to this day you can point out where these structures they built, and it's like, they build this nice pavilion down in Wichita Mountains or this park or whatever, and it's picnic tables, whatever. People are still using it today. They built back in the 30s, really nice stonework and stuff. That's bad and socialist, Tim. It's like that's what something that we as conservatives we don't want to really have too much of that. So a couple of years later, you had them all preconditioned to go to war, and then they went to fight in World War II, and then it's like, oh, we can all applaud and celebrate that.
Yeah, oh, they can. Yeah, they call that a boondoggle, but they'll look at an aircraft carrier and just go, "Wow, look at this! Isn't that great?"
Yeah, the Conservation Corps was a boondoggle, a big government welfare spending, socialist program, socialism bad. And I'm not making the case that socialism good. I'm just pointing out.
No, I know. Yeah, you can still go enjoy these parks, but then again, you go with those acres and acres of rusted airplanes. They built. Can't
even. I mean, they bombed Dresden to smithereens, to a smoldering rubble pile, and then right in the same park you have the World War II memorial, which is honoring the troops, the soldiers that died and that fought and that served, in the war, which is primarily centered around destruction, destroying things. But I have yet to see a plaque dedicated to the workers on the civilian I know there's some things around there that it's alluding to it, but I don't see big grand memorials set up to commemorate their hard work. The stuff that you can view today, that you can enjoy today, that you can. But it's like I don't know. I didn't even. Well, you see what I'm saying? It's everything's like kind of inverted. It's backwards. It's upside down. It's absurd.
Well, it's just like, everyone gets excited over the F-22 fighter, or what's the new one they can't get off the ground, F-35 or something. And that's why they built the toys and the models and the shows and get them excited over being a fighter pilot, right? And my question is, who are you going to fight?
Yeah. Well, see,
not
now
up there anymore. A missile might shoot you down. A Silk War missile might take you down or something. But a lot of these huge military platforms, infrastructures, are designed with no intention of really using them at least against an opponent that can shoot back. Right? An aircraft carrier is fine to park off Haiti or park off some poor country, but you don't want to park it off the coast of China because one of those Silk War missiles will take it out. But these things are I think are intended to be financial, pits, money pits, because someone makes money off building them. Someone makes money off the money that's lent to build those things. It's the military industrial complex.
Man, if we just had another Hitler to come on the scene that we could really get mad at and really fight, that would be great. We could use all this stuff. Didn't they say like Anthony Sutton and those books, go into how the bankers funded Hitler, Ford Motor Company,
Bolsheviks, Hitler. It's all about dialectics. It's all about
Yeah, that's how it works, and that's people would. Hey, you got to ask the question. It's like, well, how did he pull himself up by the bootstraps and his whole country and get a war machine basically built out of nothing? Weren't they decimated after World War I? And that was the whole idea behind his popularity, is he was going to pull them out of it, but just magically built this war machine out of
all this Western finance poured in.
When they were broke, right? Germany was broke, and then it's just. I mean, the stuff you're fed in history books is just so ridiculous. I just don't get it.
Then he went and overran France. I don't think they planned on that.
Right? Yeah. Nobody saw that one coming. It's like come on. It's just, I don't know. Or the whole D-Day thing. We were talking about that a while back. How absurd that was. It's like, we stormed the beaches of Normandy. It's like, well, why didn't you just go around to the other side? It's like nobody ever talks about that. It's like I don't know. There's some great reason why they didn't. No, they stormed the beaches of Normandy, so they went directly in, heads up with the German fortifications right there on the beach. And why would you do that? I don't know. I don't know. Like, especially when you got aircraft and stuff, you can totally bypass. Or even go a different route. Yeah, like I said, go around.
Yeah, the Germans did the Maginot Line, right?
What's that again?
The Maginot Line is what around it.
Yeah. Call it something. Give it some special name, and then you can't call it going around. You got to call it something else. I don't know. But
the more I look into World War II, that looks at some sort of like mass sacrifice. I don't know, some esoteric, weird, satanic thing.
Well, you would think, like all these wars and stuff, like they seem so. Of course, you got all these stories and stuff that are put out surrounding World War II and all that, and but what I'm saying is like the stuff we're presented with is pretty absurd. I mean, it doesn't make logical sense to me. But then, of course, I'm not a military strategist or anything.
Well, even then, the liberation of France, most of the destruction that occurred in France during the war occurred during the liberation period.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Right?
Germany swept into France in 1940, and there was very little, and it was, I'm sure it wasn't great, but the German occupation forces were reportedly well behaved in France. It was considered a plum assignment when you're in the German army to be in France, because generally speaking, compared to the East, it was a plum position. But all the destruction of those towns that occurred, and much of it occurred after June 1944 because they had all that fighting to France. That's when you had all the destruction, and most of the killing occurred in that 44 period, after June 44. So you call it liberation, fine. I'm sure French look at it great because Paris was liberated, and of course Paris wasn't burned. The German forces left. Just if you look at it, just take a look back at it and says, was Germany going to be in France forever? Come on. So the whole period, most of the destruction occurred in France during World War II, occurred during that 7th, 8th month period when the Allies were fighting the German army across the France into Germany. So I mean, there's a good book about that called the cost of liberation, the cost of freedom, the stories where a lot of the atrocities, the rapings, and all that stuff, the rapes. And some of these towns that existed for a millennium were destroyed during this period. Fundamentally changed the landscape of France.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that's somehow is I don't know, like the whole thing, the whole idea. I mean, these big, long, protracted wars and what the outcomes were, and it's like, I think the main objective is to re-engineer, reorganize.
Unconditional surrender. That's ridiculous. Why would you do that? Why would you? Why do that? Of course, that getting another topic, fact because they were so evil, that sort of thing. But you guaranteed the situation of the Cold War with that. You guaranteed that the destruction of German power in Central Europe, guaranteed the Russians would fill the vacuum. You get your dialectic, don't you?
Yeah. You see the what is supposedly the unfortunate fallout. Oh, we didn't see that coming.
You didn't see that? You couldn't look at a map?
Yeah. We didn't see it coming. We didn't see the radicalization of Islam happening.
Yeah,
in response to the stuff that was going on during the Cold War with him. We didn't see none of that coming, but lo and behold, here it is, and
that unforeseen thing is the next boogeyman for the next forever war.
Yeah, there's always a war, and I think that's another important component of this thing called civilization is perpetual war, and we've been in perpetual war. We've been in war since the so-called United States was founded. You know? So we've been in a perpetual, constant, continuous state of war.
That's what the report from Iron Mountain said. Supposedly it's satire, but it certainly played out in grim reality. Is that they pondered what would the effects of peace? How could you govern a society at peace? Well, the conclusion was you can't. You can't control it. You need constant conflict. You need war. You need fear. You need the enemy over there, abroad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's how you govern a society. And it can take the form of a disease. It can take the form of global warming or alien invasion. Right? I mean, so
well, that's what the Club of Rome had that meeting in 1970. That's what they expressly stated. Is we have. We need a boogeyman. What do we get? Global warming, and then that will fit the bill. That's what they say. That's their words. We've decided that will fit the bill, and that's will give us our new boogeyman we could fight. But still, we have that and conventional war, and so
well, because that's there to it's useful like in. Fighting in the in the third world or something, these so-called brush wars or small wars or contained wars, because that's important in destabilizing areas and I think creating access to resources, keeping them cheap or keeping them unused. In terms of the Soviet Russia, that was part of Wall Street's plan with Russia, is keeping it undeveloped and mismanaged to keep the resources offline. So you wouldn't compete with the Western, oil interest and resources interest, or you don't want to be independent. Russia has incredible potential with its natural resources and its position in the world to be independent of the Anglo-American, empire. So you got to keep it, you got to keep it off kilter, you got to destabilize it, and that's roughly what occurred in the 20th century. So that's what's going on there. I mean. But you have these wars that creates, that creates arenas for the drug trade, human trafficking, demands for weaponry. You know, so it keeps all these interests, and the very interests that profit off this are the very interests that determine our perception of national security, of stability. See so it's a flagrant conflict of interest. You know, you don't become an accomplished specialist in foreign affairs by advocating non-interventionism.
Well, yeah, and then so you have the United States, which is this. It's a war-centered culture. You know, I mean, we're really. I think that's primary reason for our existence is to at this certain phase in the game is to wage war with the rest of the world, and then that's what we're good at.
It's like what's his name? Francis Bacon wrote about the New World Order, and maybe that's what the plan was from the get-go, is to create this vehicle to radiate instability and
yeah, that's what we're good at. We're good at that, tearing shit up and getting in and we're seeing this just now. It's just commonly accepted as normal. These wars of aggression. It's like we just go over and just take over a country, Libya or whatever, and just destroy their infrastructure to topple their leader or whatever. It's like that's what we do now. That's our thing.
And if you're a soldier, your question is not the question why, just to do or die. And if you're a civilian, your question is just to support your mission is just to support the troops and shut up.
Yeah, and that's another interesting thing. Is like, how did that get normalized? Where now it's just
politics ends at the water edge. Really? How does that? Why does politics end at the water's edge? I don't understand that. War isn't politics.
Yeah. It's like, no, I mean, but that's just common. It's just accepted now. That's what we do. We go invade other countries, and so and then you got these.
But remember the term anti-war. I mean, the whole thing. People's actually anti-war. You're anti-war. You're hippie. To me, being anti-war is like being anti. I don't know, anti-athlete's foot. It's unpleasant. I'm against it.
Yeah, it doesn't serve any real good purpose that I know of.
Yeah, it's like being anti-cancer or something. I don't know. It doesn't, unless you can provide a sound justification for the war, which means you have to put the time into analyze an issue and deal with all its complexities and nuances and history. You're not going to get it in a fake news report from the mainstream media or a movie. You get a fairy tale. That's most people, want to consume the fairy tale.
But by all appearances, doesn't it look like we're kind of gearing up to go into another big war engagement with some country? I mean,
I don't. It's hard to say. Another large war like war. I don't think. I can't say for certain.
Maybe with Iran or
something like
Russia. Maybe all of them. Maybe
some poor defenseless country can't do anything about it.
A World War III scenario seems to maybe things are lining up for that. I don't know, but I think it's pretty much established at this point that's our, like I got through saying, that's our thing.
Oh, it's an endless conflict. I mean, that's what you get with ISIS. The NATO-backed ISIS. And not only do you get the so-called terrorist activity, but you also get the migration, which can use to destabilize Europe, and that can achieve all sorts of objectives, whether it's the destruction of ethnic-based nation states in Europe. That's a phase, or just to weaken the European community to prop up the dollar. There's all ways you can go with that. To maintain drug routes, to maintain maintain human trafficking routes. And there's all types of interests that get involved. There's always the Israeli interest in the Middle East, which is kind of this Greater Israel initiative, which is to destabilize all the neighboring countries, so Israel looks stronger, appears stronger, and can get bigger. And they exert incredible influence over U.S. foreign policy and also American culture in general. So that's a whole other faction right there you have to consider. There are many, it's multifaceted, different layers of these things, So, Well, anyway, so I think we've covered a lot. So anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's a good call. Yeah.
I think we're coming up on 2 hours and 47 minutes. So there you go.
Yeah. It's always good to talk to you. I think we always touch on some pertinent issues and everything. And I appreciate it, man.
So listen, it's Hoax Busters Call, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And so anything coming up on there? Any themes or you're going to cover there? Or
well, I do the regular Monday night calls where I take callers, and then we've been doing this series of special reports on the punk scene.
Yes, I noticed that. That's with John Adams, right?
John Adams is his research into that, and also this guy Nino, he participates, and a recent addition has been Rich from New York. That he on the last time we did one of those, he was contributing to that. So we got that, and I think that's really interesting. And
that's kind of like you're kind of like doing the Dave McGowan type analysis, right?
Yeah, it's sort of in kind of a similar vein where it's the kind of culture creation aspects of the music industry and then all the interesting affiliations between and associations between these people and the establishment. Oddly enough, punk rock and the establishment. It's like it's really interesting when you see like, okay, who are these people that are considered the founders of this punk rock whatever you want to call it movement, or and you look at the main contributors and the main centers of where this stuff comes out, and it's like these people that are tied in with some really interesting connections, or establishment people, or
the State Department, intelligence,
military, on and on. It's we got that going on, and that's pretty much it. I put some different posts that I think are interesting, and from time to time as well.
Great. Okay, listen, I want to thank you for spending so much time with me.
All right. Yeah.
And I'll let you go grab some dinner.
All right. Sounds good, man.
Maybe we'll talk again in the near future. I'll make sure to catch your shows. That's hoaxbusterscall.com, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Great.
Right.
Well, good night.
Okay. Take care, man.
Merry Christmas.
You too.